Hmm? Ah! Oh.
Mr. Mayor, you're dead wrong. This is not a good town. How many of us have lost someone who just disappeared? Or got skinned? Or suffered neck rupture? And how many of us have been too afraid to speak out? I was supposed to lead us in a moment of silence, but silence is this town's disease. For too long, we've been plagued by unnatural evils. This isn't our town anymore. It belongs to the monsters and the witches and the slayers. I say it's time for the grown-ups to take Sunnydale back. I say we start by finding the people who did this and making them pay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Still Slaying, a Buffyverse podcast. I'm Penny.
And I'm Sam.
And I'm Kara. This episode, we're going to be discussing Season 3, Episode 11, Gingerbread, directed by James Whitmore Jr. and written by Thanya St. John and Jane Espenson. The original air date of this one was January 12th of 1999, so first episode back after the holidays. And this episode had an audience of 4.2 million households for its original airing.
There were some alternative titles in other languages for this episode, including Cake House in Armenian, Sunnydale Witches in Finnish, Intolerance in French.
That's a good one.
And Follow the Thread to the Ball in Polish. I don't know what that means.
I don't either. I tried to Google it and I was like, I got nothing.
I have a Polish friend. I'm going to follow up with him and ask.
Yeah, please.
So
I like how Finnish gave away the plot of the episode, the surprise, and Polish was like they're like, no, we're gonna make a complete surprise. Totally. You're gonna have no idea what's going on.
You may recognize that voice. That's Sam, who has left us some lovely voicemails, and she's our guest host for the day. Welcome, Sam, to Still Slaying.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. Your podcast is just amazing.
We are thrilled to have you here.
Yes.
Can you just tell us a little bit about your history with Buffy and the series?
Yes, I was an original fan, probably a little too young to be watching Buffy, but I was kind of their target audience, just maybe a few years too young. I started watching it when it first came out, while all of my friends were watching Dawson's Creek and the OC, I think too. I was hardcore into Buffy, and I loved everything about it, the strong female character, and just how school can be hell, hell on earth. And so I was I think I was 12 when it first came on as a mid-season replacement, and watching it live. And yeah, she was my role model when I was going through school and stuff, and just really fun for me to look up to. And it's so fun watching it now.
Yeah.
of wow, maybe 12-year-old me shouldn't have been watching all of this.
Yeah, I have those thoughts frequently.
Yeah, you were even younger, Kara.
Yeah. I was in 5th grade when this episode came out, and I remember it.
Yes. I was 14. I just turned 14.
Man.
And I'm maybe child murder shouldn't have been on my TV.
Yeah.
Just,
It's science fiction. It's fine.
Yeah. Just opening with a
Don't
casual
worry, there's no
murder.
nudity, so
it's
fine for little kids to see violence as long as there's no nudity.
Yeah. Well, and also my parents I think they just weren't in on like maybe we should monitor what the kids are watching. Like
Yeah.
I remember watching the TV show HBO's Oz,
Oh
and
my
I
Oh
was
my
god.
14.
god.
I think I was like 14.
Oh my god.
I'm surprised you're still a functional human.
Yeah, that's a bit more intense than Buffy.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah,
god.
just slightly. I have this like I know this is like a little bit of a tangent, but I have this like core memory myself of going into my middle school teacher and us talking about the latest episode of Oz on Monday
Oh,
morning. And she's
that
like, "You watched
should
it?"
have
I'm
been
like,
a
"Yes."
parent-teacher conference right there.
That's
Like,
funny.
Sam needs somebody to supervise her television at home. That is not
She's
appropriate.
she's seeing a lot of things that aren't normal exposure TV, and that's like when I had to do like a book in like 6th grade. It was like my dad was like, "You write like Stephen King."
That was
It was
me
like
with
you.
Helter Skelter.
Yeah.
I'm like, "What do you guys expect? You showed me
Yeah.
Pet Sematary. It's the first movie I remember watching, and I
Oh
was
my
4.
god.
Dracula, I was 6.
My first movie was Benji. I'm so wholesome by
Oh,
comparison.
you
Benji.
are. That's such a cute movie.
It was the
Oh, that's sweet.
70s. I was a
Oh.
baby.
I know that's
Uh,
how I feel watching the series. I'm like, "Oh, little me."
yeah, little tiny baby Sam watching the
Yeah, just like
show.
watching it of like just the core memories. Like last week with the amends, like it's crystallized in my brain that
Mhm.
shot of Sarah Michelle Gellar looking up like, "What about me?" And I'm like, I can't remember what I did last year,
But
but
I
I
remember
remember
that.
Yeah.
this.
It's just imprinted.
It's
That's
Yeah,
totally
right
true.
here.
All right, well, let's go back to 1999 and see
Love
what was
it.
happening in the news.
Such a good time. The number one song in the US was Have You Ever by Brandy.
Aw. Yeah.
And the number one song in the UK now is no longer Believe by Cher. It is Praise You by Fatboy Slim, which is still on my workout playlist.
It's a great song.
Excellent
It is a good
song.
song.
Excellent music video. But
Yes.
it is
Wow.
no longer
Throwback.
Cher. Cher was
So
unseated by Fatboy
I
Slim.
expected it to still be Cher. I
Fair.
didn't take into account that it was gonna be like a 3-week break between episodes, and
Yeah.
I went down a little Cher rabbit hole,
Oh
and
goodness.
Believe topped the UK charts for 7 weeks. It was Britain's biggest selling song of 1998, and it
Nice.
won the writers 3 Ivor Novello Awards, whatever those are.
Hmm.
Officially, it's the
Nice.
17th best-selling single of all time in the UK, with sales topping
Dang.
$1.8 million, and it is the biggest selling single by a female artist in the UK.
Oh wow.
I looked up some other interesting stuff, and its most recent chart position in the UK was at number 85 in December of 2023. So it is still charting in
Holy
the
hell.
UK. There was a
Wow.
recent
That's
25th
impressive.
anniversary version of it released, and
Mm,
so it's having a little bit of a
that makes sense.
resurgence. And Cher is also has been having a resurgence. She had a very popular Christmas song last year called DJ Play a Christmas Song. Trying to get your Alexa to play that song is not very successful because the title of the song sounds like you're asking Alexa to play a song,
Yeah.
and it doesn't work. But I found a really interesting interview with Cher where she revealed that although she was one of the writers of Believe, she didn't ask for a writer's credit. And so she
Hmm.
has lost out on millions and millions of
Yeah.
dollars because she
That's
didn't get
insane.
a writing credit for it. And I think it's important
Jeez.
for especially women in various industries to bring these kind of things to light because it doesn't
Mhm.
really happen to men. And
Mhm.
and you
I'm
know,
just thinking of Taylor Swift and
yeah, and all
that
the and
Yeah.
whole
Kesha and
yeah.
all the
Mhm.
different
Oh,
artists who've
Kesha.
been taken
Yeah.
advantage of. I mean, it
Yeah.
does happen to men sometimes too. Like I know that NSYNC had a lot of legal problems with their
And
manager, and
Backstreet Boys. They both had Lou Pearlman.
yeah, that same horrible,
Oh,
horrible
Yep.
yeah. I mean,
person.
even dating back to like Motown, these producers have
Mhm.
always taken advantage
Oh
of the
yeah.
artists.
Yeah, and the way
We could have
that
a whole podcast on that.
music
I know.
royalties are structured and how there's different amounts of money that you
Yeah.
get for writing, for producing, for singing, for recording, for the masters. There's like so many different ways that artists can get sort of hosed and not get money for their performances. I just thought it was really fascinating, probably because I am an intellectual property lawyer, and so I love thinking about who created things and how they get paid for
Makes
it.
sense.
Just really interesting.
Awesome.
There's a couple of articles we'll put in the show notes if you want to learn more about Cher. It's not like she's, an obscure artist that is hard to find out information about, but it's always worth hearing more about Cher. Also, that song "Believe" will make a appearance in season 4 of Buffy, so we could talk about it again then.
Ooh. I saw her in concert. I was
I
too
bet that
young to
was
fully
fun.
appreciate her. Yeah.
Oh, that
And
would have been
I
great.
still one of my favorite concerts that I've ever been to. I mean, I just remember it's one of the few ones I've been to where my sister and I were out of our chairs dancing. I mean, she is such a performer. It's like her and
Those
Dolly
are fun
Parton.
Yeah,
concerts.
Yeah. It's like they're just a
unmatched.
class of themselves. Yeah, yeah. Just so good.
Amazing. Oh God, I would love to see
Awesome.
Dolly Parton.
That
Right.
really made me want to go off on a tangent about the Eras tour. That was like one of the most fantastic experiences of my life. It was the safest
Heard.
crowd
Oh,
ever.
yeah.
Everyone was so friendly. It was a ton of women for the most part.
Yeah.
And it was just like this big collective sing along where everyone was happy and dancing. And I was like, can I do this every night?
Yeah,
Oh,
Like,
seriously.
this
how
is
I want to go
I
even more
know,
than
I
I did
didn't
wonderful.
go.
before.
Yeah.
Like,
I
I
got
want happiness
lucky
and joy.
getting face value tickets during the first release of tickets. And now looking at them, I'm just like, holy hell. So there were some
I
tickets on sale for
know.
$20,000
Yeah.
on StubHub. And I was just like, this is ridiculous.
Like,
No.
no, I
Anyway,
need a car. So thank you.
yeah.
I know. We need
Oh, gosh.
transportation, not a ticket.
Yeah, and so
Oh my gosh.
since this, there we had the holiday break, we had the new year, and we're starting 1999, I included a little bit more information to kind of set the scene of what was happening during this time. So the best-selling books during the month of January of 1999 was A Man in Full by Tom Wolfe, and then Southern Cross by Patricia Cornwell took over in the latter half of the month in January. In the US box office at this time, Patch Adams was number 1, followed very closely by Stepmom, which I was obsessed with that movie when I was younger.
I'm
I
a big
guess I
Susan
liked
Sarandon
crying.
fan. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
but
2
fantastic
movies
movie.
with tragic deaths in them.
But
Oh
no
yes,
animated
those
bugs.
are yeah, no more
Oh,
animated bugs.
yeah. Oh,
Just real life tragedy
tragedy.
taking over.
That's appropriate for
So,
January when everyone's
yeah.
blue
Some
anyway.
other notable
It's
movies
appropriate.
this month was like jam-packed with some really notable events and releases. So in January of 1999, we also saw the Blair Witch Project being released, which was iconic and kind of
Mhm.
changed
Oh,
horror
everybody
for,
was talking about it.
yep,
Mhm.
it was unreal. She's All That, The Boondock Saints, Jawbreaker, and Varsity Blues,
That's amazing.
which
Wow.
such nostalgia just reading that list.
Right. Wow.
Well, Jawbreaker, one of the stars is Julie Benz, who is
Yes.
Darla
Mhm.
in the Buffyverse. And Boondock Saints, Norman Reedus, who is, of
Norman.
course, our beloved Daryl Dixon over on Walking Dead. So,
Mm-hmm.
And Freddie Prinze Jr. is
oh,
Mr.
Yep.
Sarah Michelle Gellar. So,
Yep.
and that's
like,
She's All That.
not at the time, but yeah,
I
yeah,
love
she's
it.
all that.
Yep,
Wow.
awesome. On this day in history, we have Britney Spears releasing her debut album, Baby One More Time by Jive
So
Records.
good.
That would go on to be just absolutely like definitive of the early 2000s. Um,
I remember
Betty
that
Lou
song on the
Gerson,
radio.
the American
Mm.
voice actress who voiced the narrator in Disney's Cinderella and Cruella de Vil in 101 Dalmatians, died of a stroke at 84. January 1st, 1999, a new currency called the euro is established throughout the majority of the states of the European Union. They were still using individual currency when I traveled around in Europe in 2001, but when I was
Okay.
in France in 2002, it was the euro.
Wow.
That's so recent.
Yeah, right? Pretty crazy. On January 2nd, 1999, a brutal snowstorm smashed into the Midwestern United States, causing 14 inches, 359 millimeters of snow at Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and 19 inches, 487 millimeters at Chicago, Illinois. In Chicago, temperatures plunged to negative 13 degrees, which is negative 25 degrees Celsius, and 68 deaths were reported. That's pretty
Rough.
extreme weather.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I was in Chicago during a polar vortex. They also had
Ooh.
snow thunder. Yeah, this
Snow
Floridian was
thunder's so
learning a
cool.
lot of new stuff. I was like, "What's snow thunder? Polar vortex? What in the Harry Potter? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
what is happening?" When the polar vortex, I still had to go into work with wind chill. It was negative 50 degrees.
Oh,
The
God.
Midwest is no joke.
Yeah.
No.
There's no mountains to stop the wind, so it just rips across the
Yeah,
whole
that
continent.
Yep.
lake effect.
Yeah, and it was just like I remembered it being
Brutal.
scary because like running like from my car to the hospital that I was working at, it didn't feel that cold.
Mhm.
I was like,
Yeah,
oh boy,
that's a
this
bad
is gonna be
sign.
bad. Thankfully, everyone that was around my vicinity was okay, but whew.
Jeez.
On January 3rd, 1999, Republican Newt Gingrich resigns as Speaker of the House after a poor midterm performance by the Republican Party.
Yay.
Yay, I didn't know they could resign. You'd never cut that out of like On January 4th, 1999, former professional wrestler Jesse Ventura is sworn in as the governor of Minnesota. He's the one who starts all of this. On January 8th, Bill Clinton's impeachment trial officially begins in the US Senate. On January 10th, in 1999, the first episode of The Sopranos aired on HBO. Oh, and on January 11th, 1999, Jon Stewart takes over The Daily Show and makes his first appearance as host with guest Michael J. Fox. And he's recently come back around after being away for almost a
Yes.
decade.
And it's
I
so
love
good
it.
to have him back.
It's so good.
Good.
So
He's
good.
so attractive. He is like
is.
probably right up there with my niche celebrity crushes.
I've actually met him and
Is
had
he
a beer
nice?
with him. And he was the most stoned I've ever seen a person. I took a picture with him and I cannot find it anywhere. And I have torn apart all the boxes of like memorabilia from college and I cannot find it anywhere. But there was at one time a very funny picture of me not looking great with Jon Stewart next to me with his head on my shoulder and his eyes like dilated
Saucers.
and red. Yeah.
What era Jon Stewart was this?
This was, it would have been in 1994. So this was when he was an
Oh,
up and coming comic, and I was the only person I
nice.
knew who he was. I was
Oh,
obsessed with him from an early
hilarious.
stage. And he
Wow.
came to perform stand up at my college, and I pushed my way backstage and was like, "I'm
That's
meeting Jon
amazing.
Stewart." And then we all went out, like a group of us went out for beers after and
Oh,
hung out with him.
Oh
love
my
that man.
goodness, that sounds amazing. Yeah, he's definitely Zaddy energy for me. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Mhm.
oof, sir, I know you're happily married,
He's
so
so intelligent.
But that
still
only
He's like
makes
my
him
brain.
hotter
respectfully,
because he's like
respectfully.
he's so respectful of his wife and loving of her that it's
Exactly.
like,
Yeah,
oh, he's
This
like
is
perfect.
awesome.
yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It's like
All the
this is
green flags.
amazing. Yeah, he has all the green flags. And I like how he's experiencing the polarization in American politics because he retired from the Daily Show before all this stuff started happening in the zeitgeist. And
Yeah.
he came on, he's like, everyone's mad at me.
With his
like,
Joe
sir,
Biden quips. Yeah, that
yeah, it's
was
like
Yeah.
that's
hilarious.
like yeah, I'm like, sir, this is not the same land you left.
Yeah.
I gotta tell
Wonderful.
you, there's been a lot happening since then, including a
Mhm.
pandemic. And
Oh,
on
God.
January 13th, 1999, Michael Jordan announced his second retirement from basketball.
Is this when he
Mhm.
started playing baseball or had he already started and stopped playing baseball at this
I
point?
think he had already started and stopped playing baseball. I'm
Right?
not
And then he
sure.
went back to basketball and then he retired again.
Like, was it pre-Space Jam?
I
No.
was just wondering that. I'm like, was he is before or after Space Jam?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Hmm.
I don't remember. because he played.
There's
he actually
dudes
did
all over
pretty
the
okay.
country right now who are like, I
1994.
can't believe you don't know that.
1994. Because
Yeah.
I remember that there
Oh.
was a I don't remember if it was like a 30 for 30 on ESPN or something, or no, it wasn't. It was a different show that I'm blanking on the title right now. But it was basically talking about people making fun of Michael Jordan and not realizing that he actually was pretty damn impressive in his single season. And the athleticism that he showed was kind of fantastic considering he never really played. Anyway, that's a whole other.
What?
If I start talking about baseball, I will talk forever.
Yeah, let's not go down that
So-
rabbit hole.
I
Let's not
don't
do
think you'll
that.
have a good company in me. Sports is definitely my Achilles heel. I'll just listen. That's right, Kara.
So let's get into the episode itself and some of
Yes.
the pop culture references that we heard throughout. Kara?
These are some fun ones. So, first one, Principal Snyder, when he walks into the library as it's being emptied of books by the police, he says to Giles, "I love the smell of desperate librarian in the morning," which basically paraphrases the infamous line of the 1979 movie Apocalypse Now, "I love the smell of napalm in the morning."
Smells like victory.
Yeah.
Willow and her mother have a discussion about the Mr. Rogers show. Willow says, the last time we had a conversation over 3 minutes, it was about the patriarchal bias of the Mr. Rogers show. By the way, one of my most favorite Buffy moments ever, when her mother is like, well, with King Friday lording it over all the other puppets.
Yes! So funny.
It's such a thing I would have said.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my God, it makes me so
capitalism. With a not so current reference, Xander wonders if he can trade his cow for a couple of beans, referring to the fairy tale Jack and the Beanstalk, because of course Xander would pick that fairy tale to reference.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Oh, Xander.
Oh, Xander.
Far-fetched dream, sir.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, gosh. And this one is one of my favorite moments in this episode when Buffy tells Angel about the little Dutch boy, she says, who, stuck his finger in a duck. But in the novel, he plugs a dike with his finger. That is a story featured in the novel Hans Brinker or The Silver Skates.
I have so many questions about the duck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Buffy
Like,
thought
what
that
Buffy imagine happening?
And the look on her face where she's like, oh, that makes a lot more sense now. I'm like, it would. Yeah. Buffy mentions My Friend Flicka, a 1941 book about a boy and his horse. It was also made into a 1943 movie and a 1956 TV series. She says, using what? A dictionary and My Friend Flicka?
I did enjoy that part.
Yeah, that was like a deep cut. I was like, all right, I get you. I get you, Buffy. Xander reveals that he, quote unquote, reads Playboy magazines. Because of course he does. That is also a part of the TV show where I'm like, Xander, shush,
Shut up.
stop talking.
Yeah.
Like
No
nothing
more.
you're saying is helpful and you are very irritating right now. Also, Xander, why did you bring porn to school?
To school. I
Like,
guess so
'cause-
his parents wouldn't find it, maybe. I don't
So
know. It
he's-
seems like
so he's
it's a universal
reading it?
thing around here that all the boys would hide their Playboys in like an empty lot in a junker car or something, and they all knew
Oh,
where they
it was
were.
always in like a box in the woods where I lived.
Yeah, see,
Which-
there's just like a stash.
But like isolated makes sense. It's like, Xander, why did you bring it to school? Are you like gonna like at lunchtime go and bring
Ew.
it into the stall?
Ew.
Like, why is it at
Ew.
school?
Yeah.
Like,
Ugh.
I know nothing. It's all icky. Nothing
He's
about that is good.
Oy. And then finally, when the gang is pulling up the articles about the children who mysteriously seem to have been dying multiple times throughout the centuries, the byline on one of the articles is Howard Fine. And Howard, and Fine were the last names of the Three Stooges. We had Mo Howard, Shemp, and then Curly Howard and Larry Fine.
I never would have gotten that reference.
Me neither. Me neither. And there's there's also the part where Xander, this is when you can tell he's the avatar for JW, because he comes up with this really quippy, clever line where he goes in to see those bunch of dudes that look kind of like
Oh, yeah.
incels that are
The-
waiting
the
outside to guard the
grim.
door.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, "Why looking so grim?"
Yeah.
And she's like, ha ha ha, Xander.
Yeah. We want to get in on the
Doubly
hate.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's-
Guys, come on.
and then Oz says the great line of, "You guys know you're all crazy, right?"
Yeah. Oz and Xander have some pretty fantastic moments in this episode.
Yeah.
Yes, I love it.
And the great
Ugh.
comic relief there towards the end.
We're here to save you.
Yeah. The polarity of their maturity could not be starker.
Right?
Yeah.
Like putting them like right next to each other.
So funny.
So let's get into it. It's time for a witch hunt in Sunnydale. I'm not going to sing on the podcast. There's some singing here in the notes.
Yeah, I was
But,
quoting Taylor Swift.
As our
It's okay.
guest, let's start with Sam. And where do you want to start talking about this awesome, awesome, rich episode?
So good. Well, I'm kind of bummed there's no singing.
You could just
prob-
cut in the
yeah,
lyric.
the lyrics in there. That would be great. Probably about the original fairy tale, Grimm's fairy tale, that seems to have inspired
yes.
this week's Big Bad. That was really interesting and fascinating for me. Of watching it again, I knew that it was about Hansel and Gretel, and watching the characters slowly learn that, because in the episode they finally identified the children as Hans and Greta.
Yeah.
And then Buffy says it a
Mhm.
second time. She's like, Hansel and Gretel. So it was yeah. And I don't know. Before this episode, did you ladies know about the original Grimm's fairy tales, not the
Oh,
new
yes.
version we're given?
That was
Yeah,
one of
I
my
mean, I've read them.
hyperfixations at one point.
I've read them
It's
several times. They are dark.
So good.
They are.
Oh, yeah.
They are really dark.
Especially,
And
I just think of Cinderella.
I love the
Shoving her-
entire thing of like retelling a fairy tale with a twist. There's that TV show Grimm that was
Yes.
on
that
for a
show.
while that was
Good.
so fantastic and
Yeah.
did this every week. It was a different fairy tale. And then
It was great.
So good.
the show Once Upon a Time was
Mhm.
really uneven, and the later
Mhm.
seasons went really off the rails, but the concept was so fun that there was this
Mhm.
town where all the different fairy tales just sort of coexisted in a semi-modern way. And so you would
cool.
have like Rumpelstiltskin, who was in love with like Belle from Beauty and the Beast, or like whatever. And it was
So it was such a fun show.
it was a really
in the
fun show,
beginning.
and it was fun to watch. I watched it a lot with my niece and nephew, and it was fun to watch with them because they were discovering the fairy tales kind of for the first time too, and
Aw,
so it was
nice.
all really fresh and creative to them.
It was like fan fiction come to life, like fan fiction crossovers come to life right
Mhm.
here. It was so
Exactly.
I really like the earlier seasons, and I looked up a little bit about the Grimm's fairy tales, because I am like you. I really like the Grimm's fairy tales. Probably got into them again at a at a younger
Yeah.
age than I should have. I think what started me off was actually my aunt gave me a children's copy of a version of Hansel and Gretel, and I was young. I was like 7 or 8, and I still remember this. I think she thought it was, because it's a kid's book. She thought it was, I guess, the
Age
uh
appropriate.
yeah, thank you. The age appropriate version of it, but I still remember it to this day. So I'm just on the couch going through it, because I always loved reading, and then the way it's pretty similar, to the story, the Disney version and everything. And then you get to the part where Hansel and Gretel are wandering into the woods and they're lost and they can't find their way home ever, and both of them starve to death. And that came with illustrations.
Oh,
Oh,
nice.
damn.
And like one of them dies first, and then the other one's like, I'm scared it'll, like, it was a horrific child book. And I remember just crying on the couch. And my aunt's like, what happened? And I was like, the kids died of starvation. They're hungry. And she's like, oh, there's pictures.
You saved those breadcrumbs.
Oh
Yeah.
my god.
And like my mom was like, Jerry, why did you give this to her? And she was like, it's a book. It's a kid's Yeah, because
It's
she's like,
fairy
wow.
tales.
He's
Yeah,
like,
it was
mm-mm.
like I don't know anyone else who's ever seen it, but I still really it wasn't traumatizing. But I just remember being
Oh
like,
my
wow, thanks,
god.
Aunt
So
Jerry.
funny.
But the Grimm's fairy tales they originally wrote their stories to preserve German culture and folklore, not necessarily so that they would be read by children. And as a result, the story of Hansel and Gretel and others include dark themes such as murder, cannibalism, and abandonment, which someone apparently who did children's books was like, I'm up to the challenge.
Yeah.
It's like, go a little easy on him instead of cannibalism, starvation.
Yeah,
Even
there
the
you
sort of
go.
cleaned up versions are still really dark. I mean, the
Yeah.
version that I'm most familiar with, the kids shove the witch into her own
In the
oven and
oven.
cook
Yeah.
her
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
because she
So
was going to cook them. I mean, that is already pretty dark.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's so the original one by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm in 1812, although they are also known as the Grimm brothers, tells the story of siblings Hansel and Gretel in medieval Germany who are abandoned by their parents. So already, like you said, Penny, we're off to a great start for kiddos.
Yeah.
Uh, Hansel and Gretel's parents take them to the forest where they plan to leave them. However, Hansel knows of their plan and drops a trail of stones behind him so that the siblings can find their way back home. I know in different versions there's breadcrumbs. The parents abandon their children in the forest for a second time, since Hansel and Gretel found their way back with the stones, and this time Hansel makes a trail of breadcrumbs. However, birds eat the breadcrumbs and Hansel and Gretel become lost in the woods. The children stumble across a giant gingerbread house in the woods and they begin to eat it as they are both starving. A witch who lives in the gingerbread house enslaves Gretel and forces her to feed Hansel so that he may grow big for the witch to eat. The
That's
children
right.
trick yeah,
Yeah.
the children trick the witch and shove her into her own oven before she can eat the boy. Like Penny was saying, it's great after school
Yeah.
stories here.
So
They
fun.
return they return home and their mother dies shortly afterwards. So the idea there's many different versions who have come out even around like 1812, so it's hard to kind of narrow down the first original one.
Yeah.
So
So there's
Disney kind of
allegories.
keeps up that theme. Just kill the mom.
Yeah, just kill. I mean, they're all orphans.
Fine.
How else can we relate to these children?
Yeah.
And so
I
it's
mean,
like
the mom abandoned them, so it's not like she's some great prize.
That's
yeah,
true.
and the idea in some of these versions was that the witch was actually the mom. So that's
Oh.
why when they come home, the mom has already been dead. So when they shove the mom
So
into the
creepy.
oven, the mom burns up too. So it makes sense with like the climate behind Hansel and Gretel, because it
Hmm.
was inspired by the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317 in Europe. The famine was caused by the Little Ice Age, a period of widespread
Oh,
cooling and
yeah.
drop in average global temperatures that brought cold weather and torrential rains to Europe. This seems hauntingly familiar.
The Little
Yeah.
Ice Age is something that inspires global warming deniers. Like, it's
Yeah.
just climate change. It's just
Ugh.
the climate
It's
does different
just
things.
climate change. We
Yeah.
should send them Hansel and Gretel if like this is what comes about with climate change. You're
Hope
ready?
hope you're looking forward to some
Yeah.
cannibalism.
Yeah, to eating your children. The rains were particularly harmful to food supply as they rotted the crops and promoted disease that infected the livestock. And, this how the famine created dire conditions in Europe. And the elderly often went hungry to spare the food for the younger people. And parents often abandoned their children because they
Oof.
could not feed them. And some people even resorted to cannibalism. So, yeah, the climate change deniers. Here's a look into your future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and fun fact, Buffy references Hansel and Gretel a couple of other times, I think, and the one that stands out to me the most is that season 1 episode, Nightmares, and Xander leaves a little trail of chocolates in the
Oh,
hospital
yeah.
to find it, and that's inspired by the breadcrumbs.
Forgot
I
about
love
that.
how they're all clearly very well read,
Yeah.
and it makes me really happy anytime there's just even little subtle references like that.
Yeah,
I
it's
love
why
it.
the show holds up so well because it's so
Mhm.
smartly written with so many
Yeah.
layers. You don't
Really
have to
is.
understand all that in order to get the episode, but it makes it richer.
Mhm.
And you get more of
Absolutely.
the references every time you watch it. of course.
Yes, very much so.
Fairy
Yes.
tales are generally creepy. It's funny, even when I watch the like Disney movie versions of them, sometimes I'm like, I don't
Mhm.
think this is a show for kids.
Yeah, it could get a little
No.
unsettling.
Yeah, like Beauty and the Beast, it's like, okay,
God,
so your father sells you it to this stranger who lives in a house and he yells at you, but you're secretly supposed to fall in love with him and
I
his
was
talking furniture.
obsessed with that movie. That and Lion King were the ones that I watched
Oh, I
Oh.
hate
over
Lion
and
King.
over again.
Oh
And Hamlet.
I think Lion King is so
no.
racist.
Oh, it
Well,
definitely is.
it is.
Oh, it definitely is.
I, in general, do not like any story where the thing
Like
that
Jungle Book.
saves the day is somebody who is the inherited power and has
Oh
never earned
man.
anything in their life. Like when Simba comes
Yeah.
back in Lion King, everything like suddenly there's rain in Africa again because he's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
son, the golden white son
I
of
was
the
gonna say
king.
voiced by a white actor. Yeah.
Yeah,
As a
and then
child, I
the
think it was the musical theater nerd
I mean, the
in
music
me.
is great. It's Elton John. I
Like,
mean, how do you not love
yep,
that music? But
yep.
the the hyenas being voiced by Whoopi
Oh my
Goldberg and
gosh.
Cheech and Chong, for me,
Yeah.
was so
Yeah.
racist. I was like,
It was.
those
Yeah.
are
Oh, why would you say
recognizably
that?
ethnic voices given the role of, like,
Uh-huh.
scavengers, and then you have, like, Jeremy,
Irons.
Irons as Scar, and, like, it
Yeah.
just I was alone. When the movie came
Yeah.
out and I saw it and I was like, "That movie is racist." Everyone I would talk to was like, "What?
Oh my god.
No!" And,
Had they not seen any previous Disney movies?
I
Yeah.
mean, I don't
Like,
know.
or,
It was a time when
media
people
in
weren't
general?
as I don't know. I was just out of film school, so I was like I
That'll
was
do
also
it.
the one who was like, Wizard of Oz is classist. These poor
Yeah.
munchkins are living in a ghetto, forced to work for a slave owner. Like I just my friends were all like,
Oh,
"Stop ruining movies."
but
Yeah.
it's true. I see. This is like, I mean, we see this in this episode too, of the power of emotional mind over logic mind.
Yeah.
Seriously.
I mean,
Oh, and
here we're looking at
listeners,
it.
Sam is a psychologist. We're so lucky to have her with us for this episode because there's all this groupthink going on, and I think
Yes.
she's gonna address it right now.
Oh yeah. So thank you, Penny, and I'm definitely I nerd out at human behavior. So thankfully Penny and Kara are brilliant, and also will probably help me to like rein it in, so I'm not putting your viewers to sleep of just how much I like to go into this. So groupthink is a phenomenon that occurs when a group of people, usually I gotta say, usually they're pretty well intentioned and they
Mhm.
make irrational or non optimal decisions spurred on by the urge to conform or the belief that dissent or disagreement is impossible. So this usually leads to like problematic or premature consensus. This is the characteristic of groupthink. Many are fueled by a particular agenda, and it also may be due to group members valuing harmony and coherence above critical thought. We see that a little bit later in the episode in that quick scene between Joyce and Willow's mom,
Mhm.
where they're saying, like, this has been really hard for you. Yes, this has been really hard for you too, Joyce. We should get coffee. It's like, what is
Yeah.
happening? You're going to burn your daughters.
Yeah.
Good morning, sleepyhead.
Mom, you don't want this.
You do?
Since when does it matter what I want? I wanted a normal, happy daughter. Instead, I got a slayer.
Torch.
Thanks. This has been so trying. You've been such a champ.
Oh, you too, Joyce.
We should stay close, have lunch.
Oh, I'd like that. How nice.
So I
That's
titled
amazing.
that clip "Joyce is still Joyce" because
Well,
even when she's being possessed by demons, she's still the woman who was like, "So, do you live here in town?" Like she's always Joyce, and I love her
She's
for it, even when she's
she's
doing
can I
something
just
horrible.
say, when I was in 5th grade watching this episode, I did not connect that Joyce and Willow's mom were being influenced at all by the demon. And
Oh,
I was just like, I had started reading, there was a book that came out in 1997 by Lois Duncan called Gallows Hill, and I was obsessed with it. And basically it had to do with the girl moving into Salem and the spirits of the accused witches were kind of communicating through her again. Anyway, it got me into a hyperfixation on the Salem Witch Trials. And so when I watched this episode as a 5th grader, I was like, see, this is what happens.
Yes,
They're
it's
falling
so
for it.
yeah.
Sam, I was just saying, maybe you can tell me what like the distinction is, because when I think about this episode and I think about Salem and the Satanic Panic, eventually I think of the whole idea of, group polarization, where when you are in a group, you just seem to adopt more easily extreme positions, like you mentioned, to conform. And I know it can be as little as you happen to behave a bit differently when you're around a certain group of friends or when you're around certain
Right. Or you
coworkers.
start to like
Mhm.
the same music, or
Yeah,
you dress similarly. That's a big one.
right.
Yep.
So how is that tied into groupthink specifically? Is it distinct from it, or is it like an umbrella where groupthink is under it, or how does that apply?
That's a good question. I would say it's definitely part of what contributes to groupthink is cognitive bias,
Oh
and
gosh.
it's connected to cognitive dissonance. So when we're
Mm.
a part of the group, and we see this in the episode, right, where Joyce starts out just being horrified, and she's an emotional mind, and Buffy even picks up on it. She's like, "You just need to calm down," which, FYI, that statement has never worked in the
Right?
history of using
It's
it.
like, oh,
So,
good, I'm calm now.
Oh, thank you. I never thought of calming.
Huh.
yeah. Like, calm down. Oh, I didn't think of it. And then you hear like Giles saying that to her, and she's like, "Well, don't tell me to calm down." I'm like,
Yeah.
that's usually
I
the
like that
reaction.
cut immediately.
Yeah, and so you see her having this emotion, and the episode does a great way of making, I guess, like an allegory or a metaphor of how emotion can become infectious and how it starts to
Mhm.
spread to different people, and it becomes this sort of in-grouping and out-grouping, which human beings are really great at doing. And people who have groupthink do this. People who have mass hysteria do this. That's, we're right, they're wrong, and you always have to pick someone to be on the out group. You
Right.
have to be better than someone. It's an
I
unfortunate
mean,
human tendency.
it's
Yeah.
evolutionary, right? It's like
Yes.
it comes from the days when we were all competing for resources and you
Mhm.
teamed up
Mhm.
with people to survive, but that also meant you had to team up against other people who were trying to survive, and you vilify
Yep.
them in order to justify
Mhm.
violence.
Well,
Exactly. And that goes really bad.
and it's the parallels between this episode and what the town was dealing with, comparing to, say, like the Salem witch trials, where clearly in Salem, there's this puritanical culture. There are
Mhm.
these deep seated beliefs that witches are real. They have a
Mhm.
compact with the devil. And, people want to be able to explain strange things that they see. And in Buffy, Joyce in her little speech rattles off, like, how many of us have lost someone who just disappeared or got skinned, like in Go Fish, or suffered quote unquote neck rupture? I was just like, so they are dealing with these things that they don't quite know how to explain, which just builds into this panic and
Mhm.
hysteria. And I have to think this also has to do with the idea of an echo chamber, where at
Yes.
some point they're all thinking and reinforcing this panic and idea. But it
Mhm.
just, God, I love this episode.
It's
It's
so
yeah,
I
no.
rich.
really do.
It's exactly what you've described, Kara. Like it does become an echo chamber, and we see
Ugh.
this in our current day lives as well. Is we do seek out people who, and this is how groupthink forms and
Mm.
confirmation bias occurs. Is one of the questions that comes up is, why do we remain so steadfast in our beliefs, sometimes even in the face of overwhelming opposing evidence?
Mm.
And like, confirmation bias is a part of this, and if you get
That
a group
shit's
of people
strong.
together, yeah, like,
You just
and then
reinforce each
everyone's
other.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's like, see, it is us versus them, and we know better than they do. And it's all like
Yeah.
emotional. Cognitive bias is it's it's defined as the tendency to selectively search for or interpret information in a way that confirms one's preconceptions and hypotheses, and to disregard any information that doesn't support it.
Yeah.
Now, those of us on this podcast, we have a lot of cognitive flexibility,
Mm-hmm.
and just even talking and hearing the podcast, there's a lot of ability to take in new information and see how it incorporates into our existing beliefs about the world. People who go into emotion mind, they're the ones who favor belief over these facts. So the emotion mind comes first. That's part of our animal development, our human adaptation. Our lizard brain is always going to happen first with stuff
Mm-hmm.
that's emotionally triggering, either positive or negative. And then it's kind of our job to check that with our prefrontal cortex and be like, okay, I have an emotion. Emotions aren't fact. It's telling me something, but it doesn't mean I
Right.
necessarily need to act on it. Let me evaluate what this means. People in groupthink don't do that. People in mass hysteria don't do that. They stay with the emotion and they stay there, and then they bring in other people because fear is contagious, and bringing it all in. So like for the Salem Witch Trials, they did illusory
Oh.
correlations.
Yeah. Sorry, you
Yeah.
said fear is contagious, and I just
Yes.
pictured like, a herd of, we were talking about the Lion King. So a herd of wildebeest, one
Uh-huh.
wildebeest
Yep.
gets spooked or senses a predator nearby, and
Yes.
boom, they all
Mm-hmm.
freak out and take off.
Yes.
And it's just,
Mm-hmm.
it's so wild to me that as humans who have this, ability to self-reflect,
Mm-hmm.
the number of people who don't realize that they're engaging in that type of behavior, say, for instance, not to get too political, but if you watch Fox News day
Mm-hmm.
in, day out, don't see anything else, you get on Facebook and it's basically this echo chamber of
Mm-hmm.
people agreeing with you, spouting stories off, not bothering to fact
Mm-hmm.
check, then it's inevitable that you're not gonna be open to any other information. You're gonna
Yep.
demonize other opinions and just dig further and further into your beliefs with that cognitive dissonance. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just,
And
it's
then
exhausting
there
to
Yes.
think
are
about.
Absolutely.
powerful people who understand exactly how this works
Oh yeah.
and take
Oh,
advantage
yeah.
of it in order to manipulate large numbers of people. And we
Oh
see
yeah.
it in politics, but we also see it in religion. We see it in
Mm-hmm.
wartime. It's really huge in
Oh,
wartime.
yeah.
I did a lot
Mm-hmm.
of research about this sort of lizard brain versus prefrontal cortex stuff when I was covering She-Hulk, because She-Hulk
Mm-hmm.
is the physical manifestation of your brain stem overtaking your prefrontal cortex and
Yeah.
flooding it with adrenaline and cortisol and all those things that
Yep.
make anger so
Mm-hmm.
powerful. And
It
fear
is.
is as powerful of an emotion as anger.
Absolutely. If you tie something into survival, there is nothing stronger in human beings, in creatures in general. I mean, that's why people develop trauma disorders, is
Makes
because
sense.
that fear is connected to your survival. That it's not impossible. It does require a lot of work to undo, and it probably is still going to stay with you for the rest of your life, but you get to get control back.
Mm.
It does require you to sit in that fear until it passes, and it does. It's just it's short-term distress for long-term benefit, and it goes against the very thing that your brain is telling you, which is run, like fight or flight. So
Yeah.
like whenever this stuff comes up, I like to say, and it's not even my verbiage, I'd learned this a long time in grad school, where we're using primitive tools in modern day circumstances. So when we're having a disagreement with someone, our animal brain kicks in and it says, it takes in the environment that we are disagreeing, and it releases cortisol into our system, which makes our heart rate, which makes our brain think, see, something's wrong, we have to fight or flight or freeze, which or fawn, which is when
Fawn.
people,
Oh, fawn.
yeah, people do the fawning around people. And so it's like, yeah, but we're not in life or death circumstances, we're disagreeing, but they're not threatening
Yeah.
our lives or throwing things at us. Something from my past is coming up,
That
but
reminds
like
me
that
of that
requires a lot of work.
meme
Yeah, you have to
that
learn how
says
to do
something
that.
like,
Yes.
I'm sorry that I didn't respond to your text. I'm dealing with a brain that was meant to sit in a cave and eat berries all day or something like that. She's like, yeah.
Yes, it's so
Like,
true. It's so true. We haven't adapted. Like our brain gives us the same anxiety response as a saber-toothed tiger in the room with us as it does to sending an email to our boss. It makes
seriously.
no sense.
It's
It's
yeah,
catching. It needs to catch up.
it's dangerous.
And
And is it
It's
true that
cortisol and anxiety.
traumatic memories are stored in a different part of your brain than sort of standard memories because they're
yeah,
linked to your brain thinking they're crucial for survival? And
absolutely.
so they are fresh when you remember them the way that another memory might
Oof.
fade over time. And that's why the term trigger is true. Like you're
Yes.
being triggered with a memory that feels like it just happened.
Well, I feel like
Yes.
that's part of
100%.
post-traumatic stress disorder and how
Mhm.
some people, when they're having those flashbacks, feel that you are there in the moment,
Mhm.
actually experiencing it again.
Somatic
And
cessation, yeah.
oof.
Yeah, and exactly, and like that's why like people will say like, well, how come I always remember the negative memories the easiest or the most? Or when I get bored, my brain goes to negative stuff in my past that I can't fix. We're
Mm,
programmed that way. We
yeah.
are like and it helped our species to survive to this point. It was more evolutionary adaptive for like ancient humans to know if I go to the left, there is a tiger over there. I don't know why I'm picking on tigers today, but like, there, there's there's a tiger over there, and I know it hunts over there, and it's going to attack me because it killed one of the villagers. I saw it happen. That
Mm-hmm.
is way more important for us to remember, along with the death and the tragedy, than if I go this way, that's a really pretty sunset. And that is the
Mm-hmm.
best view of the sunset. Both of these are vital for us. Like one's for survival and one's for thriving, which is just as important. It can be argued, like, yeah, you survive, but for what? And if you're constantly in survival mode, as we've seen on The Walking Dead and in some episodes of Buffy, like it is like it's not fun. Yes, you've survived, but you have to have a purpose to that too, something that makes you feel positive. So
Yeah.
it's like the negative stuff was more important, and we're programmed to remember that. It just takes more effort to be like, but this good stuff happened
And
Mm-hmm.
as
also,
well.
that negative thing isn't actually happening again. I
Yes.
need to find a
Yeah.
way to think my way past it. And that's what
Yeah.
PTSD is when you
Yep.
can't get yourself out of it. You're just
Yeah.
like
And
stuck in there.
yeah, and it is working with people who have PTSD. I try to bring up that it like they're like, it didn't become a problem until I came back from the military, or it didn't become a problem until I left that person. Yeah, because the very things that helped you to survive are now misfiring afterwards. They weren't a problem when you were in war or when you were in a war zone, like
Because you
being
needed to
in
be in
people's houses.
survival
Mm-hmm.
mode.
Exactly. It helped you to survive and you needed it. It wasn't as much of a problem. Now that you're safe, now we need to deprogram something you rightfully needed at the time to survive. So
It's
it's a
why
good thing, but we need to
some
quiet
of
it down.
my favorite characters on The Walking Dead, and this is not a Walking Dead podcast, but are Carol and Daryl. Both of
Yeah.
Mm,
them
love
had
them.
domestic violence type trauma
Mhm.
in their
Mm-hmm.
pre-apocalypse life. And
Mhm.
both of them adapted very well to the apocalypse because their survival instinct brain
Mhm.
was already developed. And so living in a state of constant anxiety was like almost comfortable for them. So they were
Yeah.
better able to cope with the apocalypse because they just were better
Absolutely.
able to cope with anxiety because they were used to just living with it.
Well,
Exactly. Like, oh, go ahead.
oh, sorry, I was gonna say, it
No,
makes
no,
me
no, please.
think of, I mean, I guess slight trigger warning for domestic violence and abuse, but one
There's
thing
going to
that
be so many trigger
frustrated me,
warnings at
I
the
know,
beginning of the
but
episode. Yeah.
Yep.
one thing that frustrated me so much as a prosecutor when I would deal with any case, whether it was a capital murder or, I quote unquote simple assault, class A, like misdemeanor domestic violence case, was getting people to understand what was actually happening in the brain of a
Mm.
domestic violence
Mhm.
victim and survivor, and how you are essentially, while you're experiencing that, your lizard brain basically takes over. It
Uh-huh.
is
Mhm.
survival mode. You lose that capability
Yep.
of higher thinking and making rational
Mhm.
decisions. Like, they aren't thinking, you know how do I leave him? I can plan this out. They are thinking,
No.
how do I protect myself, my kids, my pets, and live day to day without triggering some sort of violence against me?
Exactly.
And I just, I just wish that it was more common to address these things, honestly,
Yeah.
either in school or I don't know, because it
No, I'm
seems to
with
be a
you.
lack of education and understanding on it, and
Mhm.
that's a lot
Yep.
to cover in an hour of jury selection. And the
Just
number
a
of
little.
things. Yeah, people say,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
if my significant other hit me, then I'd be gone that day. And we would give the, frog in boiling water analogy and everything like
That's a
that.
good one.
And
Yeah.
it's just, I don't know
There's
what
so
it
much
is.
we're taught
Yeah.
in this culture and a lot of sort of Christian-based cultures also that an inability to get yourself out of a bad situation is a personal moral failing and has
Yeah.
nothing to do
Like
with
homeless
societal
individuals.
structures
Mhm.
and economics
Yes.
and trauma brain. So
Yeah.
we're taught to think, well, if you have that problem, that's your failure and not
Yeah.
we're not a trauma-informed society. We're a
No, not at
moralistic
all.
and puritanical one. And
Yeah.
so we
Because we're
like to
still by
blame
Puritans.
people for their own
Yeah.
problems. Like, oh, well,
Mhm.
that's clearly you did something to deserve it, or
Yes.
you didn't get yourself out of it because you liked it, or whatever it is that is something that makes us feel more comfortable about ourselves. Like, oh, that could never
Yeah.
happen to me because I'm a better person. And it's not
Yep.
true.
Mm-hmm.
No, we call it fundamental attribution error in psychology, is with the tendency to overemphasize personal factors and underestimate situational factors when explaining other people's
Yeah.
situations. But when it comes to us, we are aware of the personal contributions.
Mm-hmm.
So, but when it comes to other people, that's why they say, like, well, if my partner hit me, I would just leave. Yeah, okay, like
Yeah.
that's a nice hypothetical, but psychology can tell you that's not everyone's like response of like what this hypothetical discussion, we're not in fight or flight mode, and that does get you right off. And
Mm-hmm.
like the survivors who have been through domestic violence or assault or really like any type of violence, your brain takes over. Like that reptile brain is what you usually need to get out of it. And like if you're
Yeah.
fawning, if you're freezing, or that is necessary to survive, and you did your job, you survived. It's the afterwards is the societal information. And
Mm-hmm.
part of our humanness is we like to sort of figure out how can I predict it so it doesn't happen to me. And we see this a bit with Joyce of like of she says like she's she's immediately her daughter's mother, and she's like, I'm gonna do something. It's like, that's right, Slayer Mama, you
Yeah.
want to do
What does
action.
Snyder say? It's just like she's like when Buffy's like she hears the name Moo for the first time and she's like, who came up with that stupid name? And Snyder's like, who is their founder? I believe you call her Mom.
Mom.
It's just like,
Yeah,
oh
it's just
god.
it's
I
like it
have
is a
that one
terrible name.
too. Here we go.
Oh,
So good.
This is intolerable. Snyder has interfered before, but I won't take this from that twisted little homunculus.
I love the smell of a desperate librarian in the morning.
You get out. And take your marauders with you.
Oh, my. So fierce. I suppose I should hear you out. Just how is, blood rights and sacrifices appropriate material for a public school library? Chess club branching out?
Point.
This is not over.
yeah.
Oh, I should
Fair.
say it's just beginning.
There should
Fight
be
it if you want. Just remember, lift a finger against me and you'll have to answer to Moo.
Answer to Moo? Did that sentence just make some sense that I'm not in on?
Mother is opposed to the occult. A powerful new group.
And who came up with that lame name?
That would be the founder. I believe you call her Mom.
So good.
I love the quotes that you pick up, Penny. They're so perfect. They're so perfect.
I enjoy
it's-
doing it. Like finding
Fucking
finding the
Snyder.
different little sound bites that really illustrate the episode. There are times when I'm like, oh, I have 45 minutes worth of sound bites. That's more even than the episode. I should cut back a little bit.
Yeah,
But
well, and
they're
it's
so
just
good.
this episode reminds me of one of the so in my 3L year of law school, you can take, some electives for subjects that aren't necessarily on the bar. And I did a seminar that was aimed at basically the history and evolution of law and the justice system in the United States, which was fascinating. But we had a small section covering the Salem Witch Trials, which I was super excited about. And it turned into one of the worst classes I can remember because of how we ended up debating about whether or not we were still at risk of something like that happening
Yeah, we
today.
are.
And I was just
Yeah.
like, do you guys not pay attention to anything? And we brought up,
Oh.
McCarthyism and the Red Scare and the Satanic Panic in the 80s and the McMartin preschool
There's so
incident, the
much.
West Memphis
Yeah.
3. And I was just like, I am very concerned that all of you are going to be practicing law in a year. And
Yeah.
you're like, no,
Yeah.
we're past that. That's
Yeah.
the past. And
No.
Giles brings up that what is happening in this episode, this mass hysteria, he says it happened in Salem.
Mhm.
And maybe that's why I love this episode so much, because of the fascination with the Salem Witch Trials. But it is just so relevant today still.
Mhm.
And when he, everything that Moo does, and just kind of blocking any sense of logic and reason out, like we've been talking about, acting purely on the
Fear.
fear, it is so dangerous.
I
And
know.
it shows you, yes, there was a demonic influence in this episode, but there are plenty of real life examples that show you just how easily this can happen under the perfect storm of circumstances.
Like all of these things, that what we're seeing happening is like, yeah, like we have like this emotion overrides logic, and emotion's going to come first. If we don't use the logic to override it, then it's just going to stick around. And we have mirror neurons in our brain, and because we're social creatures, whether we like it or not. We all really found that out during the pandemic, didn't we? Of
Oh,
like, I think I
yeah.
saw something online where it's like, I'm an introvert but not this much of an
I
introvert. I'm
mean,
like,
as a neurodivergent introvert, I was pretty damn happy. Like, I wasn't happy with what was going on, but I was just like,
of
this
course,
is
of course.
awesome.
Yes, there were some outliers that were like,
it was
no,
not a
I'm
normal
good.
response to the pandemic.
No, you're fine. It was normal. It was okay. You weren't alone.
Whenever we would talk about, like, maybe working remotely or working from home, because I used to do it, like, maybe once a week, and people would be like,
Mm.
"Oh, do you wanna shift to working from home full time?" And I was like, "I think if I spend that much time alone, I'm gonna get weird." And
Yeah.
yes,
Sounds wonderful.
I got I got real I mean, I was, like, too comfortable being alone all the time, but then when I tried to, like, go back out into the world, I had forgotten how to be, like, a friend.
Yeah, like a person. You
No.
were not alone. See, you guys got to quarantine. Us
Oh
first
yeah.
liners in the
Oh,
hospital.
yeah.
Boy.
Yeah, I got to like risk death every day. It was a trauma in and of itself, where it was like we were needed. Could I have done my job remotely? Sure, but Memphis hospitals were not going to allow us to do that.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I just remember like, I won't go on too many of the tangents of like going into patients' rooms, of like, put yourself into like the summer and the spring of
Oh,
2020. We didn't
god.
know enough. And I remember just crying of like in the office being like, I hope I didn't just kill this nice man, because he was fine. I mean, these patients were in the units and they were there for
Mhm.
weeks. I'm the one that's going home back and forth. And
Ugh.
like, so it was just like all this stuff that was going on. But yeah, we were seeing this, like the isolation was an issue, and then people were also liking it, but then having issues like reacclimating, and then people were having their own panic response about being in crowds. I mean, we're further along. It's just, yeah, I felt it too, but it's just, you gotta just go. And that's the idea. If you have most fears, if you sit in them until they pass, and
Mhm.
repeated exposure, it does get better. It's really awful to have to sit in it. So like, what we see a lot of this stuff happening is the cognitive dissonance. And we see this a lot in the episode. I mean, cognitive biases are
yes.
what can happen with, I mean, that's that confirmation bias, that's the fundamental attribution error, all this errors in thinking. And so cognitive dissonance it's defined as a state of tension that occurs whenever a person holds two thoughts that are psychologically inconsistent with each other, and we don't really know what to do with that as human beings. So Leon Festinger introduced it in 1957 after he infiltrated and studied a UFO cult, convinced that the world would end at midnight on December 21st, 1954. And kind of long story short, in his book he recounts how midnight came and went, and the cult members began to look for reasons on why the world didn't end on that night. This is what like cognitive dissonance, like you can't sit with it. It has to be a confirmation bias. Why did it not end? So they came to the conclusion, their leader, because of course it's the leader, came to the conclusion that her members had received a message from automatic writing, which is just scribbling. It's something else, but like this is what they did, which told her that the god of Earth had decided to spare the planet from destruction. So relieved, the cult members continued to spread their doomsday ideology to non-believers. So they just double down. It's not that our religion is wrong. It's that we have to shift it to some extremes for why it makes sense. And we see this in the Salem Witch Trials. Like you said, like the environment was rife for it, and these are humans, these are women, these are, I mean, even going further back, they were drowning witches, and the idea is if you actually drowned, then you weren't a witch.
Right.
Yeah, what a
like
bonkers
how does
premise.
this logic come in?
There's
Or
that-
burned at the stake?
That reverend who was executed under suspicion of being a witch, and he was able to recite the Lord's Prayer, which was something that they believed witches could not do. And it's just, I can imagine what was going through their
Yes.
brains at the time. I mean, they still executed him, but
So
Yeah.
I have heard theories over the years that what contributed to the Salem witch trials being so very bad was that there was some kind of hallucinogenic plant in the area that was affecting people. And it occurs to me that in the episode in Gingerbread, that the energy of the Hellmouth is constantly
yes.
pumping out into all these people in Sunnydale,
Yep.
making them susceptible to this kind of thing even more so than they would
It's a
be
good
normally.
point. That's a
Combine
good
that
point.
with the inexplicable disappearances and deaths. It's like that perfect
powder keg.
storm, and it parallels the perfect storm of circumstances that led up to the Salem Witch Trials, McCarthyism, and the Satanic Panic in the 80s. And it's just, God, such a well thought out episode, but it makes sense. They fall right into it. That mom mentality ends up taking over. The hysteria takes over, and before you know it, you're trying to burn your daughters at the stake.
Yeah, like mass hysteria, like it's so dangerous, and this cognitive bias is so dangerous because when you get a group of people together, it gives us some sort of psychological permission to accept the extremes of other people.
Yeah.
And so it allows us to do things that maybe morally, ethically we wouldn't be comfortable with, but because the mob is all together and we feel so supported, we're willing to do it.
Like storm the Capitol.
Yeah, like that. Like the good idea to
Or
storm the Capitol.
to keep it not political,
Yeah.
the riots that happen after sports team wins.
Yeah, like
where
frickin'
people
Philadelphia,
who are just
especially.
normal people are suddenly like tipping cars over and lighting them on
Lighting stuff on
fire.
fire.
And I'm sure if you met that person under normal circumstances, you wouldn't be like, this seems like the kind of person who would destroy property. But it happens all the time. They
Well,
just
even
get
think of like
riled
Woodstock.
up.
90, was it 99?
Oh yeah, when
So,
they tried to do a second Woodstock. Ugh.
Yeah, and this, you think of mosh pits and people at concerts and getting trampled because something triggers something, like even little examples here and there where your instincts just take over, and sometimes in modern society that is a detriment.
Oh, like
I
Black Friday
absolutely.
tramplings, right? Like,
Oh my gosh, I
God.
it's like
know,
I have
right?
to
Like,
get into that Best Buy, and then people have been killed. It's
Yay,
unreal.
yeah.
capitalism and
Yeah, it's
consumerism.
yeah, it's a capitalism. It's like every year when my family we have Thanksgiving, I'm the one that ruins Thanksgiving. But like
Me too.
I ruin yeah, it's like I'm that fun one. And it's funny because like my uncle says he's like I never expect it from you. You're always so bubbly and happy and then it's just like out of nowhere of like tonight's someone's last night on earth cuz tomorrow they're going to kill someone or themselves as they try to get a toaster oven. Like
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
like why? He's like, "Why are you like this?" And I'm like, "Education, information. Aren't you happy?"
And on a smaller scale, people going into further and further debt because they have to have the new electronic or it's such a good price and
All that
Exactly,
jazz.
because it's a status symbol, and we have to be accepted by
Oh,
others.
it's such a good price, so I'm saving money by
Mhm.
spending this money because it's such a good deal.
I mean,
Girl
clearly
math.
I have used this rationalization before
I have
Yeah,
to
too.
that would
justify
explain
purchases.
why I have so many graphic
Yep.
t-shirts.
But I'm aware of
Yeah.
it when I'm doing it. I don't know if that makes
That
it
is the
better or
difference.
worse.
That is the difference. So it's like as long as you're aware of it, it's when you deny reality. It's like no, no, still like that's the thing. And you have your own reasons for it. But that's what I
Jeez.
tell people of like, it's useful our emotions are giving us a message and we do need to
Oh,
to address it. But like oh, no, go ahead.
gosh, that reminds me. I'm listening to an audiobook now that it's old, but it's been around forever. The Gift of Fear.
I love that book. I read it in grad
Yes,
school.
it
Yeah,
is
it's very true. It's very, very true.
fascinating. And I
Our
won't go too much
emotions
into it, but
yeah, Gavin
recommend
DeBecker.
highly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too, Gavin DeBecker. And that's the thing, like our animal brain, it's useful. So when people say I don't want to feel angry anymore, I don't want to feel scared anymore, I don't want to feel sad anymore, I'm like, well, then you're just an automaton. Like
Yeah.
this stuff like you can't feel happiness without sadness. That it sounds hokey, but it's true. Like so it's the idea of like if you shut all this off, then you're shutting off what helped you to survive as well. The idea is we want to turn down the volume on it. And how we do that is we help our logic brain do
Mhm.
this exposure activities if we go into these activities and we do them and then our logic takes over of oh okay and this is sort of summarizing something that's like really hard and takes a long time to do but
Mm.
it is that thing of emotion and logic cannot coexist and I've had to teach medical teams this of like when someone's in emotion mind you cannot come at them with facts it's not going to work and we see that in the episode too we saw that with
Mhm.
this with the satanic panic it doesn't work
Mhm.
Yeah, you
so
have to physically calm the person down
yep
before you can reach them, which
yep
is why things like somatic exercises, breathing exercises, where you're
Yeah.
concentrating on the tangible physical and not saying you need to calm down, that will never work.
Mhm.
The person will not
Oh,
calm
no.
down. But if you say, take a slow breath with me so that I can
Mhm.
understand what you're saying better,
Love it.
that might
Yeah.
reach them. And then
You have
once
such
you can
good
calm
training.
them down, you can start to reach them with rational thought. But you
Yeah.
can't just intellectualize it or you're never going to get anywhere. In fact, you're just going to
No.
make them angrier.
Yeah, because they
Um,
can't when someone's in emotion mind, it's just like they this is great for a podcast, but, like, think of, like, the horses in Central Park with the blinders on, that's what emotion mind is. You're trying them and they are
oh,
narrowed
I
in.
feel
Their
so bad
perceptive
for those
field is, like
horses.
I know, it's
Yeah.
it's not a great
It's-
thing.
mm,
So, it's like, and the demons in the show do such a fantastic job. Like, I am
Mhm.
kind of curious if JW asked some people in mental health
I'm
because
sure.
yeah, because what they did is like, okay, Hansel and Gretel, dead kids,
Yeah.
the demon is going to be that. But the like if like watching the episode, the demons showed themselves to Joyce, not to Buffy. They showed
Mhm.
themselves to a parent, to a mom, and they probably overheard
They
like, "Hey,
know
honey, I
she's
just want to support you."
susceptible.
Yeah.
She's a mom.
Yeah.
She's a mom. And like you see it throughout like the history of this stuff happening and you find dead kids on a playground. I mean, the sort of incongruency in there. And of course, they're
Mhm.
dead, white, blonde haired children. So of course people would always care,
Eh,
unfortunately. Like,
I was
they're
wondering if we were gonna get to that
yes.
because
I
it's
mean,
like,
I'm like, let's talk about everything that's
we've
difficult.
little
we've
Aryan
talked about
children.
it
Yeah.
before that this show is really egregiously
Yes.
white, considering
Yes.
especially Southern California, which is one of the most diverse areas of our country.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sunnydale is frighteningly white. I have
Yes.
recently started to feel a little bit better about it because I've decided that the reason Sunnydale is so white is because people of color sense the bad vibes coming
Yeah,
out of the
yeah.
Hellmouth and
I
get the
laughed.
And they're
hell
like,
They're
out of
"Fuck
smart.
there. They're like,
I love
that's
it.
some white people fish. I'm out.
Yeah.
I am so guilty of white people stuff.
Yeah.
I gotta tell
Yeah.
you, like, when I saw that stuff on TikTok, I'm like guilty.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
am totally gonna
almost
go and look
every
at it.
single one.
There are
Yeah.
so
Or
many
the
times that I'm like,
phrases.
"Oh, I didn't know that was a white people thing."
It's the humidity
I
that'll
do
get
that
you.
all the time. Like, what was it
Yep.
recently I found out was a white person thing? Oh, taking a photo of a group of people and then going, "Let's take a funny one."
Oh my
Apparently
god.
that's a white
What's a
person
white
thing.
person? Oh, I'm so
That
guilty. I'm
or
so
getting
guilty.
to a restaurant or somewhere and you get in line and then a bunch of people show up. It's like, oh, we got here at the right time. And I was like, wait a second, is that not a normal thing? Do people just say that?
Yeah.
That's another
This
one.
this is like a little tangent I have. So if we ever go out to like restaurants, one of the things I used to do because they used to have to ask for names, and so I would put down Donner.
Uh-huh. Oh,
So
Donner
when they would
Party?
announce it,
The
when they
Donner Party.
like,
Oh my
like the Donner party's ready.
That is fantastic.
And I loved it because a few people would giggle, and it's like I know who knows their history.
Yeah,
That would
that's
make me so happy if
that
I
is so
opened
funny. If I
that.
heard that in a
Well,
restaurant, I would be like, "What?"
yeah. Well,
And I would
speaking of
probably say,
history,
if my name was Donner, I would change it.
yeah, it's like that's not a thing.
I
But
would not want to have that there, the Donner party.
Yeah.
But
no.
yeah, so it is like so. I mean, the demon they find like yeah, like these Aryan children, and they do this, and it's like what better way to spread the panic and fear
Than
than
dead
to like
kids.
militarize. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
that is like every parent's worst nightmare is dead children.
Yeah.
Obviously not they don't want it to be theirs, which then further fuels that fear and you see it. Like you see like all the parents kind of catching onto the infection. Interestingly, I don't know if it's because Giles is a watcher or because he doesn't have any kids. I mean, Buffy aside, we know it's his adoptive daughter and she can take care of herself. Of like it doesn't fall prey to this mass hysteria that is spreading like an
Yeah.
infection by the demons.
It is interesting because first of all, the women definitely take the forefront. It's the mothers.
Of course.
And
Of course.
that's to be a parallel with Joyce, and then we get to see
Mhm.
Willow's mother and their messed up relationship. Like that Willow's
Bunny.
it's so funny
Buffy's
when
Yeah.
Willow's reaction to Buffy's mom coming on patrol with her is like, she would take the time to do that. Oh, not
Yeah,
the point.
right. Yeah, that's not what I should be focusing on.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But
Oh, I have a whole thing on her mom.
her mom
Gosh.
her mom is clearly the model, by the way, for the Leonard's mother on Big Bang Theory.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
That is like spot on the same character.
What did you say? You talking about the demon picking, basically the perfect form to appear in to
Mhm.
generate all of this. That is what really made me go down the satanic panic rabbit hole
Mhm.
and talking about how mothers and parents are often the ones that can kind of lose themselves in this panic and hysteria, and that is exactly what happened in the 1980s.
Hmm.
And I will say, so a lot of this information, are we ready to talk about this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, please.
A lot of this information, aside, I didn't want to just type from what I remembered, obviously. So there's a New York Times article from March 31st of 2021 by, I believe it's pronounced Uhas, Alan Uhas. And we'll link it in the show notes. And it's basically, the title is "It's Time to Revisit the Satanic Panic." And I think it is very appropriate to revisit that even still. But for those that maybe aren't familiar or have only heard the term satanic panic, in the 80s specifically, there were a few circumstances that really led to this outbreak of hysteria. So, first, there was a book entitled Michelle Remembers, and it was published in 1980. And it had a plot and characters who were basically a bunch of murderous Canadian Satanists. And the article describes it as it landed on a powder keg of American anxieties. At that time in America, especially, more women were going to work and working outside the home for the first time, either by choice or necessity after the women's rights movement, and as the country was dealing with a recession. And at this point in time, conservatism and kind of the religious right were really starting to gain steam and take over. And I just think of Ronald Reagan and
Yeah.
all the and
He
Tipper
really
Gore in the
empowered the religious
90s.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was intense. And there was this, common theme with parents, all these mothers going to work having, an issue finding good, trusted daycare. And there were lots of parents feeling guilt, moms feeling guilt, dealing with this for the first time. And it led to this kind of perfect storm of circumstances for a moral panic. And one of the instances that helps set this off is that the country was finally really waking up and recognizing the problem of child sexual abuse. And when you combine this, new fear that's being unveiled and talked about in the news with worrying about leaving your kids for the first time in the care of another person in a daycare,
Or worse, latchkey kids. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
like it is just it's kind of that perfect storm. And there is this infamous case that actually was close to Torrance in California, where Buffy is primarily filmed. It was in Manhattan Beach, and it's dealing with the McMartin preschool. And there was one woman that was the center of all of this, saying that there was an employee at the McMartin preschool that had sexually abused her son. The
I remember
police
this
sent
case.
out a letter to about 200 families asking for help with their investigation, asking for parents to come forward if their children had said anything. And when you have a bunch of people who are uninformed and uneducated and panicked, then going to their children and asking whether or not they had experienced certain things, you're going to get a lot of, kind of false outcries. And in criminal law and law enforcement specifically, when you have a child victim or a child witness of a crime, they typically go through a forensic interview process with someone who is taught and skilled at getting information without leading, without implanting any possible ideas. So all of these parents, these 200 families that got these letters, are now panicked about their child being a victim to this, quote unquote new phenomenon of child abuse. And it took off like wildfire. Eventually, there were some parents that ended up taking it upon themselves to dig under the preschool because they were convinced that there were secret tunnels down there, and they were letting in all of these, satanic pedophiles coming in and taking part of this ritualistic abuse of the children. And of course, as the religious right is taking off, and you have this focus on the unknown, the what kind of satanic rituals are going on here. And it was absolutely wild. It got to the point where they were accusing the school of, bloody animal sacrifices. Some of the children apparently had said one of the school employees could fly, which is very reminiscent of the Salem Witch Trials, where some of the girls, Ann Putnam and her friends, accusing Tituba, who was her family's basically slave at that time, and other women being able to fly or, appear as a cat and things like that. And it's eerie how similar some of these accusations ended up being. And the FBI gets involved. Ultimately, you know, the news and talk shows, which were becoming hugely popular at that point in time, focused in on this. And these employees, 6 teachers, and the founder of that McMartin preschool ultimately were indicted and tried criminally. And it was just an absolute wild time. It ended up, there was a mistrial at first, and or the first case they were deadlocked, which did result in a mistrial. Then the second prosecution and trial ended in a mistrial, and the prosecutors finally dropped the case at that point. There were still thousands of people convinced of their guilt, and the state of California had spent about $15 million on the prosecution of that case. And then it eventually came out that it was inaccurate, never happened. It was wild. And during the same time, in the early 90s, I say during the same time, but basically as a result of this same phenomenon, there was a murder of, I believe was it 3 or 4 little boys in the West Memphis. I should know
Oh
that.
yeah.
The West Memphis 3 in Arkansas. Damien Eccles kind of became the figurehead of that, and they were falsely accused of these ritualistic sacrifices of these children, and there are still some people today that just don't accept that they were wrongfully convicted because they were kind of alternative and wore dark clothes and listened to metal and didn't quite fit in this town of Arkansas, just like a lot of the targets in the Salem Witch Trials were those outliers. And we see that in this episode. Amy, who is back, which I love, and her friend Michael, who are both witches, are both, portrayed as kind of, goth, quote unquote. And they've got
Light
the dark
goth.
eyeliner. Yeah.
Light guy.
Light goth. And the WB's version.
I
as
was
well.
just gonna say, I was like, what they would find acceptable.
Yeah. And poor little Michael getting slammed into a locker with his black eyeliner. It's the same idea that these outsiders who are not conforming to the societal norms are then targeted. And this has to be intentional in this episode, right?
Oh,
these are very similar processes that account
wild.
all these different times, and we're so vulnerable to it. That's
it
in-grouping,
just happened
out-grouping, us versus the
again
others.
with the whole Pizzagate thing.
Oh,
Where
God.
I know.
they were convinced that there was a pedophile ring operating out of a pizza chain, and that guy went in and shot the place up because he's like, oh, they're abusing
Gotta save
children
the
in
children.
the basement, and there's no
Yeah.
basement. It's based on nothing except this, people have a lot of anxiety, and somebody says something that makes them focus on something, and then it grows. Stranger Things did a beautiful treatment of Satanic Panic in season 4 with
They
the
did.
character of Eddie. I have a little Eddie
So
action
well
figure right
done.
here. Here's my Eddie.
Oh,
Eddie.
there's Eddie.
We
Oh,
love
and
Eddie.
he's in one piece there.
Yeah. There he is with his
I don't want to
Hellfire
remember
Club
him in
t-shirt
any other
on.
way.
And he's going to be in the new Fantastic Four, this actor Joseph
I
Quinn. So yay!
know. Yes.
But they did a beautiful job of Satanic Panic in that episode, because there were in Stranger Things there are supernatural things going on, but the whole town decided that this guy Eddie was responsible because he likes Dungeons and Dragons.
It's so challenging because yes, fear takes over. I see it as an infection, and we were taught about that case in grad school to bring up that it used to be believed that children would never lie about sexual abuse, and or make up stories about it, and that was used as a landmark case of that's not true, and they are susceptible to the adults, usually unintentionally, leading them in a story. And we see that, especially if authority figures tell us something, we tend to believe it without fact checking, and that is just something of
Especially
how
your
we are as people.
parents.
There was an experiment that was done in, I think, the 1970s or maybe the 1980s. They could never do this again, where psychologists took a bunch of young kids all under the age of 10, and they said, your parents lost you in a mall. I mean, fairly innocuous. Like you were
Oh,
lost and then they
yeah.
found you. Did you hear about that? And then even
Yes.
like the parents were helping them of like, yes, you were, but they didn't give them a lot of details. Like, yeah, you were lost. And the kids were at first like, no, I wasn't. And they're like,
Yep.
yes, you were.
The
And
memories
then
just
they created their own memories from
yeah.
that. And so like the researcher would be like, so you just because you have to debrief them, you can't damage people to think that they've been lost. And he's like, so you weren't actually lost. And like I think like over half the kids were like,
Poor kid.
yeah, I was wearing a pink shirt and I was wearing blue jeans, and no one had given them they created these memories
Fascinating.
which were still there 10 years later when they revisited those kids, who still like, even the parents were like, no, but we didn't lose you in the mall. And they're like, yeah, you did. I was
Yeah.
I
wearing blue
remember it.
jeans. Yeah. And it's like, we
Uh,
can create these memories, which is why people
yeah.
are terrible historians, because
Another
we see it
reason
through a
why
lens of our own
And also,
experiences.
eyewitness
eyewitnesses.
testimony. Thank you.
Terrible.
Eyewitness
Terrible. It's
testimony
terrible.
is not
It's terrible.
great unless you know the person. Even then, there are certain circumstances.
Yeah.
But the number of times someone who is on death row has been convicted primarily because of some sort of eyewitness testimony makes my
It's a little
stomach
too
turn.
high.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
it's a little
But
too high
it's
stakes.
completely unreliable. And
Mhm.
also, the more you question the person and reinforce the story that they've told, the
Yep.
stronger it becomes a
Yep.
memory for them. So even if
Absolutely.
originally they were like, I'm not quite sure what happened, by the fourth time they've told the story, they're like, I remember it completely.
Yeah,
yeah.
and it's like now it's fact. And like this is, this is something that plays out, and we see this in the story of how Joyce becomes, first she's traumatized because the demons infected her, and she was patient zero, I guess, in my brain of like, then she
Yeah.
called all the moms and dads and got them all together. I'm like, oh, you spread this fear, ma'am, this this demonic
Yeah.
fear. And you
Ma'am.
see it like, yeah, ma'am, come on, Mama Slayer. But we see this like, and it goes so big, so big, so big that they're rationalizing their motives to the degree that they are now putting the very children that they wanted to protect in danger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Indoors,
this
I might
kind of
add,
happens.
which is
Yeah.
odd.
That's a good point.
Yeah, setting a fire inside City Hall seems
Yeah.
short-sighted.
Unless
That's
the
a
demons just wanted absolute chaos, because it seemed like Moo was locking the doors
Yeah, they were.
Yeah,
as
Because
well.
that's why
So I was
Oz
like,
and Xander
yeah,
had to crawl
fall
through the
through the
ceiling
roof.
vents.
That was a great moment.
I love that they
They're
were
really
too
close.
late. Oh my god, it's so
I
cute. They were trying
know.
so
Yeah,
hard and they
we're
had
here to
all the
save
best
you.
intentions and it just
They're like, did we do it?
That was
Yes.
pretty adorable.
You did. You brought levity to the scene of, yeah, there were just some like really great parts.
oh
There's
my god.
one thing in particular that I feel like we definitely need to get into. And Penny, I know that you had discussed talking about this.
Oh, banned
So
books.
yes. So a
Oh,
couple of
yes.
things. The scene in general, um, where they're burning the witches at the end, and that whole environment reminded me of Fahrenheit 451, which is
I
one
think
of my
intentionally. Yeah.
yes, I
Yeah.
think that had to have been with these writers. They knew what they were doing. And I love that book. And of course, as they're doing the locker searches, Xander makes a reference to Nazi Germany, which of course Hitler and the Nazis also banned books. And there is a line in particular where Joyce talks about how, any kid can go in the library and just learn about anything and get any sort of ideas. Do you know how much that terrifies me? And I was like, is this today? Yeah.
Moo just wants to weed out the offensive material. Everything else will be returned to Mr. Giles soon.
If we're gonna solve this, we need those books now.
Sweetie, those books have no place in a public school library, especially now. Any student can waltz in there and get all sorts of ideas.
Okay, Ron.
Do you understand how that terrifies
Well, let's
you?
introduce Joyce to the internet.
Mom, I hate that these people scared you so much. And I know that you're just trying to help, but you have to let me handle this. It's what I do.
But is it really? I mean, you patrol, you slay. Evil pops up, you undo it, and that's great. But is Sunnydale getting any better? Are they running out of vampires?
I don't think that you run out of...
It's not your fault. You don't have a plan. You just react to things. It's bound to be kind of fruitless.
Okay, maybe I don't have a plan. Lord knows I don't have lapel buttons.
Buffy.
And maybe next time that the world is getting sucked into hell, I won't be able to stop it because the anti-hell sucking book isn't on the approved reading list.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put down...
Yeah, well, you did. Doesn't matter. I have to go. I have to go on one of my pointless patrols and react to some vampires. If that's all right with Moo. A nice acronym, Mom.
Giles getting so angry about the censorship and them taking all his books. Like, Angry Giles was once again very attractive to me.
Yeah.
I know.
You know,
I was
"You
like,
tell him,
say more,
Giles."
sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Keep talking, sir.
Yes, that righteous
I'm
anger.
intrigued.
Yeah.
So sexy.
Like,
So
the censorship is wild.
Joyce
yeah, and
doesn't have, like, she's not completely wrong, right?
yes.
First of all, Buffy is in a front line of the battle reactionary role. Her role
Yes.
is to kill evil that pops up, and she doesn't have a plan. This will come up in the future when we talk about how much I hate the Watchers Council and how maybe the Watchers Council has a macro view while Buffy has a micro view, but Joyce is not wrong that Buffy
Yeah.
doesn't have an overall plan. That's true. And Sunnydale is not getting better. It's just she's just keeping the forces of evil at bay. And also, these books probably do not belong in a public school library, except that we've already established that hardly anybody ever goes to the library in
Right.
Sunnydale High School. So, and Giles is there, and I'm sure he doesn't let, regular students check out the like blood ritual books, right?
Yeah.
Those are
Yeah.
for his group and for what they're doing. But I mean, she's not 100% wrong. The problem is the extremism. The problem is the
Yes.
violence. The
Extremism
problem
is always the problem.
the lack of
Yeah,
any kind of
exactly.
perspective. Like, if what they had said was, if you move some of these books to your home, we could just like this could be done. Like, why don't you
Yeah.
do more of your research in a private location and not in the high school library?
Yeah.
That would maybe have solved a lot of it, but that's not what's happening here. It's hysteria, and
Yeah.
it's the same with. Are we ready to talk about some banned book stuff?
Oh, hell
Just-
yeah.
Yep.
But like,
Sorry.
no, sorry, because
Yeah.
like my brain is gonna be like, "Ugh." Like my brain just like forgets stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's exactly like Penny. What you described is exactly what gets rid of or reduces groupthink is divergent opinions. That's why
Yeah.
like people are so big. One of the reasons they're so big on bringing diversity into workspaces because you don't want an echo chamber. Bad stuff happens,
And it's not just
inaccurate
about
stuff.
and it's
Unless you're
not
Samuel Alito.
it's not just about
Yeah.
needing diversity of opinions on, volatile topics like this. It's also been proven time and time again that different ways of thinking, different brain types, cognitive diversity helps solve
Mhm.
problems. That you
So
have a
much.
better solution at the end of the day if you have a variety of brain types working on the
Exactly.
problem. Always.
Exactly. Exactly. Like disagreement does not mean disrespect, and people in groupthink or mass hysteria view it that way, so they're too scared to say something with all these emotional people around them.
Can we
Yeah.
acknowledge the irony and the ridiculousness of Joyce basically saying that Buffy's reactionary and just reacts to things?
When she's being so
So-
reactionary.
Yeah, I was just like,
So that
Joyce,
It's
that's
called
rich.
projection
Yeah.
in psychology
Yeah.
is when we feel something, but it doesn't sit. So it's much easier to put it on the target of our distress and blame them. That way you don't have to do anything with it. And she is in such an emotion mind where she thinks she's coming from logic mind because it's the Hellmouth. And Buffy and Angel talk about this. It's not about winning. It's about keeping the forces at bay because we saw a couple of weeks ago what happens when she's not there to do that.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
love
great
that. The
Yeah.
fact that they bring this up again after in the Wish, we just learned. Buffy asked, like, is Sunnydale a better place than when I first came here? And we just saw how god awful it would be. Like the writing
She
and the
doesn't have that
storyline
memory.
structure of this season
I
is just
know.
Chef's
Well, it's also
kiss.
like, yeah, like it's so good, and like and her mom is coming from her own place of fear. Yes, it's a demon and infection, but it's
Mm.
settled so strongly in her because her daughter is on the front lines and has to be, and it's not her daughter's choice. Her
And
daughter
Yeah.
was like has to do this. It's her calling. She was born to do it. Which I'm curious if maybe reading too much into it. If Joyce has some parental guilt of like, did this develop in the womb? Is this something I passed on to
I'm
her?
sure she
She
does.
asked that when Buffy first reveals. She's like, Joyce was like, "Was I not there? Did I do something? Was I not there
Yeah,
enough?" Like she goes through like this list of
yeah.
reactions, and it's
It's a
almost like the 5
parent.
stages of grief.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
it's just like a parent thing. She wants to protect Buffy so bad that she's now in the emotional mind and hurting Buffy. She's like, "You're not doing anything useful,"
Yeah.
and so it's like,
Mm.
Joyce, like
It's like,
we
damn it,
just see
woman.
how this gets so bad. But yeah, like the book burning. I mean, that is absolutely such an emotional mindset. Like
Yeah.
I don't know too much about it.
We
Any.
recently and I'll only touch on this briefly, but we recently had some book banning controversy in my community, and the number of attorneys that went before our um I'm drawing a blank. Basically our city council. Um in our commissioner's court in the county, speaking out on how what they were trying to do was a blatant violation of not only the spirit of the First Amendment but the actual law and our constitution. The I guess it would be kind of appropriate to say cognitive dissonance, where they're like, no, we're not banning books for any reason other than we're simply removing the offensive material, which happen to be books
Mhm.
involving, mention of gay individuals or non-binary individuals or teenagers having sex and suicide or all of these things. And we're like, do you guys not understand what you're doing? You are afraid of the ideas in these books. That is what you're doing. You are stepping
Mhm.
in as the government, taking over the role of the parent. And it just, it happens, I think, on various scales all over the place, but
and it
Yep.
especially
and it
today it seems to be
repeats. It's a
fresh.
cycle,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
now today's version of the Satanic Panic is a transgender panic, right? People
Yep.
all over this
Yeah.
country are terrified of trans people, which
It's
is
yeah,
completely
I get
not
this.
borne out by any facts.
No.
No,
There's no
no, no,
evidence of
nothing.
any
Nope.
trans person attacking kids in bathrooms or any
No,
of this stuff.
no,
Plenty of
nope.
evidence of members of the
Yeah.
Senate doing these things. But
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah. Oh, sorry. And it's like, yeah, and like transgender people are mostly the targets of violence in
Oh yeah.
bathrooms, and
But
there
we
is not a
can't
single one.
possibly acknowledge facts.
yeah,
That's not
facts
true.
have nothing to do with it.
Well, it's also like I didn't have this saying. Someone else more clever than me came up with it when the bathroom issue was coming up. Of like, since when does this country care about women being raped?
They don't.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
don't.
I was like, no, wait,
Or
but
care
like,
about women's sports or girls'
yeah,
sports
Yeah,
and
they don't
how
yeah.
care
fair
about
they
that.
It's
are.
like,
All of a sudden, there's all these grown men who routinely make fun of the WNBA or anything having to do with women in athletic activity, being like, we have to protect the integrity of our girls and
And
their
it's like, do you
sports.
understand how few transgender people there are? Like,
Oh
this is
yeah.
not
yeah,
a wide scale, quote unquote problem. This is a
yeah.
tiny, tiny fraction of the population that are
Mhm.
just trying to live their already difficult lives.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're blowing it out of proportion in order to distract from the fact that we live in an oligarchy full of
Yeah.
Yeah.
corruption and powerful
100%.
people are
Mhm.
pointing you at trans people to distract you from the fact that they are exploiting you. So
Yeah. Well, look.
Exactly.
it's so
Exactly.
cynical and it's
It's
so
like, ugh.
disturbing. And
Yeah.
what's really interesting to me, I was doing some reading about sort of the history of banned books and the current situation with,
Mm.
there's been a resurgence of trying to ban books lately, and that it is almost always parents who their kid brought home a book and the parent was like, I don't want you reading that book. Therefore, it should not be in a library for
Yeah.
anyone to ever read. Not just I
Mhm.
should parent my kid, but I think that the library is at fault for even having this book. And of the top 10 2023 banned books, all of them are on subjects of gender identity and
Yep.
sexuality. and they are all
That's so upsetting.
objected to because the parents call them sexually explicit. They liken a book about, like, I have two dads, to being a book that is porn, because they think
We
acknowledging
God.
somebody is gay, just saying someone is gay, is the same as like extreme and descriptions of or photos of
Well,
sex acts, which
of
we
course.
have
also
had
violence is okay but sex isn't. That's a whole other
well,
topic.
Well,
there's a
I
Jon
mean,
Stewart Daily Show clip from a long time ago that's very apropos for this, where it shows all the different violent lines and scenes from primetime television
Mhm.
that are just horribly graphic and violent. But the one thing I was going
exactly.
to say, these people have basically taken over and twisted. They look at US obscenity law, and we have it, we have a statute incorporating that in Texas for obscenity. And there are 3 elements to it, and they take one element and focus on that, about something being sexually explicit, and ignore everything else that you would have to prove. And they have been arguing that it's against the law. And if people don't know, why would you know what obscenity law is if you're not an
I
attorney
don't
or
know.
interested
Yeah,
in
I was
that?
like, I don't know
And
that.
it's that they take information and they twist it. And it's the same
Mhm.
idea with banning books. They want to limit what information and ideas are available, and limit what you're exposed to, so that you ultimately end up thinking and behaving the way that they want you to, the way that they behave.
Yeah, this odd dichotomy that exists, like where how I think should be how everyone else thinks, and at the same time, no one should tell me what to do. And it's
But they
like,
love
what
freedom,
those two can't
apparently.
coexist. Like, like yeah, it's like yeah, they want to ban all the books, but when there was a quarantine due to a pandemic, they're like, no one gets to tell me to stay home. And it's like, okay, like this is like we're all losing the plot here. Like not us, but like the people
Yeah.
who are having these sort of like arguments. And
Mhm.
it's what we're seeing happening with the transgender community. It's coming from a place of othering and dehumanizing, and because they're narrowing this community down, these individuals down to sexuality, and sexuality is only one part of all of us human beings. And they're like, no, 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 it's sex, it's bad. It's like, no, that's easy for you to do because people generally still get uncomfortable in the United States when it comes to sex. So
Yeah.
if you only focus in on this one part of their identity, which you're labeling as sexuality, then you can dehumanize them and other them. Well, you
And then
can
it
other them
justifies
Like the
anything.
witches.
anything you do. Then we cannot have like yeah, exactly. So it's like
Mhm.
this is all just so awful. And I know your audience is probably pretty much on board with us. I can tell
Yeah.
you there is no scientific, psychological, sociological fact that supports any of these
Yeah.
things that are being said about transgender individuals to
Nope.
persecute them and discriminate against them. There is none. And I kind of wish the medical and psychological community would be louder about this,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
these people are more likely the targets of crime, individually and systemically, as we're seeing play out.
And it's
It's
frustrating
ridiculous.
because it's such a small community.
Yeah.
They don't have the numbers or the
Mhm.
power to effectively defend themselves, and so they have to rely on, the larger queer community, or
Mhm.
fair-minded straight people like me
Mhm.
to defend them. And it's a test, I think, by right-wing forces who like
Mhm.
to control everyone, to first vilify and take apart trans people as like a model, for then
Mhm.
they're going to go after gay people, and then they're going to
100%.
go after people who have different religions, and then they're going to go after, I mean, they already are. They're coming for women.
Yeah.
They're coming for people
Yeah.
of color. They're coming for Muslims. It's happening right under our faces. And, I
Mhm.
live, and Sam lives in true blue Massachusetts, where we have pretty liberal laws, and, our state generally votes blue. Not that the Democrats are that much better than the Republicans, but, Kara, you live in
I
Texas,
know.
where,
Mhm.
they have effectively taken the concept of slavery out of high school textbooks and replaced
Yep.
it with imported laborers.
Yep.
And I did find one really great story on NPR, that there is a high school unnamed in the suburbs of Houston, Texas, where there is a clandestine bookshelf of banned books or challenged books in a classroom that the students and this one teacher
Oh, I
keep
love
secret.
that.
And this
Oh.
one 17-year-old girl said, some of the books that I've read are books like Hood Feminism, The Poet X, Gabby, and A Girl in Pieces. Uh, she says the books
Fantastic.
sparked her feminist consciousness. I just see, especially in my community, a lot of women being talked down upon, and those books were really nice to read.
And this is fairly recent, this focus on book banning and everything in Texas. So I grew up in Houston. I went to a public high school, and my English classes every year we would celebrate banned book week. My elementary school celebrated banned book week, and there would be displays specifically where you could go in and see all the different banned books and check them out and learn about why they were banned and why it's important not to ban books. And from what I can tell, talking to people who have kids in the public education system in Texas now, and you know, friends who are directly involved in education as teachers or counselors, whatever, it is drastically different than when I was growing up. And that terrifies me because I feel like
Yeah.
we were very well informed and well educated. And I remember learning about very, diverse topics. And it just, to think about how it's changed is just very disheartening, and it's only getting worse,
I mean,
unfortunately.
yeah, like we're seeing there's this conversation that's happening in mental health circles because we're trying to understand it
Mm.
too. It's hard when we're like dual
Like, what is
processing. We're
happening?
like, yeah, like, well, that's a good question. We're involved in it too. And then it's like, and I don't think I think we'll know like 10 years from now everything that's been going on because research takes forever. And
Yeah.
there's this idea that's been floated around, especially since Roe v. Wade was overturned, of why
Mm.
now?
Hmm.
Like why now is all this stuff like book burning and well, that too, but like book banning coming up, and why are these transgender laws coming up now? Like, why is Roe v. Wade being overturned now? And the idea is that this is a society reaction to the progress that has been made,
Yep.
Hmm.
of like we are kind of the first generation, I would say, like in the last 20 years, has really shown women being in not just jobs, because women have always kind of been in jobs, uh, but also women attaining higher levels in the job, so
Yeah.
CEO being in charge, and these sorts of this progress being made, and with these different groups of people. So this
Yeah.
is more of that fear
Yep.
and that reaction from a particular
Yeah.
segment of people who view it as fearful rather than progress and evolution. And they're
Yeah.
having this reaction, and they are getting the whole group together to have change. And it reminds me, when you guys were talking about it, of the German pastor Martin Niemöller.
Mm.
Niemöller
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
of First they came for the socialists, I did not
Yeah.
speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. And it is really disturbing what we're seeing happening nowadays, the violence that we are allowing to happen, the discrimination we are allowing to happen, because we
Hmm.
are. This country could absolutely change things if the majority wanted to take action.
Yeah.
And so it is this challenging thing of we're sort of seeing why history repeats itself,
Well, I'm
unfortunately.
hoping, if I have to pinpoint, I know we're going off, but if I would have to pinpoint when I feel like the first little flickers of, you know, backlash, I would say when Obama was elected
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
when it started.
absolutely.
And then
Absolutely.
once Trump was elected, it
Hmm.
empowered people who,
Yeah,
may keep their views under wraps because it wasn't
absolutely.
publicly acceptable. It became more mainstream.
Hmm.
And I am hoping that because of the age that we live in, with access to more information at our fingertips, with more connection, it causes it to spread faster. But I am hoping that there can be some sort of positive aspect to it where people
There's gotta
recognize it. Where,
be.
like I think of TikTok, there's trying to
Yeah.
ban TikTok, and there are
Of course there.
great
There
content
are.
creators on
Yeah.
TikTok educating
There are.
people about the the abortion issue right now, exposing people to ideas and personal stories of transgendered people or gay people or a person of color, and you can be exposed to different perspectives now, even if you live in a bubble. And I just have to hope that can be a positive thing
Yeah.
at some point.
Evidence shows, polling shows that the majority of Americans are actually more progressive than our
Yes.
country's politics. We just have this messed up, imbalanced electoral system and, gerrymandering and all these different ways that
Yeah.
that people have gotten more power than their population merits in a democracy. And the religious right really grew to prominence under Reagan because he accepted them into his coalition of Republicans. Republicans weren't religious before that, but he was
No.
like, here's a voting block I can use that isn't
Jeez.
being serviced by either side. And if I just tell them I'm opposed to abortion, they'll vote for me. And then he created a monster. And the religious right has taken over the Republican Party, and politics has been skewed ever since.
Well, you
There's
think
such
about
extremism there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, and we see this in the episode. I mean, like, I know we're talking about like everyday stuff, but we see this in the episode too, right? I mean, we have the
Yes.
mayor
Yeah.
who we know a little bit
Oh,
about,
the
we'll learn more about.
mayor.
But she says, she's like, he'll fix it, and it's like
No, he won't.
why,
Yeah.
Joyce? You've never met this person before, I don't think. Like,
Stop
and she's like, he'll
relying
fix it.
on authority figures.
Yeah, it's just like this deference to it. And then
we know, she doesn't know, but we know that he couldn't be less interested in stopping demons from doing anything.
Right, he
No,
loves
which
it.
also sounds oddly familiar.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like it's just one of these things where it's like, I mean, Buffy was the one to like try and call out of like, and she actually, I think Angel, another demon in the episode, like a
Yeah.
vampire, but like broke her cycle by saying, where are their parents? And that ended up short-circuiting her emotion mind because she was open to hearing it from Angel. And that's the logic of like, yeah. And then she goes in and she talks to the Scoobies and she's like, what are their names? Who are their parents?
Yeah.
And this is the logic coming in for the emotion. But
Yeah.
what happens
Why has
to
nobody
them?
claimed these dead
Yeah.
children? Like,
But what happens to them is they're burned at the stake.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
like this is actually how it goes.
I will say,
unfortunately.
I 100% love that whole final scene. I know in the Buffyverse and the fandom, it's kind of a polarizing episode. Some people really don't care for it, but I think this is one of my top 10 rewatches. I will rewatch this one every time we see Amy turning herself into a rat and being able to escape that way.
Why? Like, I knew that she
know.
turned herself into a rat, but like, I mean, even Buffy goes, she couldn't have done it to us first. But
I know.
of all the things
Maybe
you can do, Amy,
instinctively,
that
people
was it?
will part ways if a rat is scurrying by.
But
I mean,
she like, I would thought she would have attacked them.
no, she
They're
just
not her parents.
she just got herself out of there.
Yeah.
So funny.
It's pretty funny. I love that scene because when she starts, she's like Goddess Hecate, and Buffy's like, "Oh no."
Oh.
Yeah.
She's been a rat. She knows what's coming. She's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I know where this is going." And and
Nice
then
little
Amy
continuity
runs,
and
and
callback.
Buffy and Willow are like, "Oh no, we didn't get saved." But then Willow has the brilliant idea to try to scare everyone, and she threatens them with her
Willow.
powers.
Fear.
You've seen what we can do? Another step and you will all feel my power. What are you gonna do? Put a pencil on him? It's a really big power. Yes, you will all be turned into vermin. And some of you will be fish. Yeah, you in the back will be fish.
It's one of my favorite lines ever.
You in the
Like,
back.
fish?
Fish. It's like, that's very threatening. Very
Technically,
scary.
that would kill them
Right.
because
No, there's-
like they're
they're
gonna suffocate.
fish out of
But I'm
water.
like, that is great.
Oh
It'll
my
be
gosh.
fish.
You'll be fish. It's such a great moment because Amy confirms to them that she's a witch, right? The
Yeah.
people who
Oh,
are
yeah.
gathered there, like up to this point, they haven't seen any actual evidence of magic, and Amy just confirmed it. So then
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh, we definitely have to burn them."
Yeah.
It reminds
Way to
me
go,
of
Amy.
Harry Potter when Harry in Prisoner of Azkaban is doing his homework at the beginning of the book over summer. He's learning about the Salem Witch Trials,
Yeah.
and
I
all
remember.
of the actual witches back then, of course, survived. And he talks about how that one witch enjoyed being burned at the stake so much because it was like a tickling feeling that she allowed herself to be burned over 100
I
times or
remember
something
that
like
too.
that. Like,
Yeah.
of course,
Forgot about that
Amy,
too.
the actual like competent, powerful, practiced witch, is able to get out of it. And meanwhile, Willow and Buffy are
Are
just like, hey,
stuck there.
what? Like,
Yeah, she's like,
Yeah.
she's like, not it. She was the witchy equivalent of I don't have to run fast, just faster
yeah,
than you.
then,
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
100%. And
Burn
there are
them.
just, oh, there's so many
Which
great moments in this episode, but
We've barely talked about the episode, but that's
I
okay
know.
because
I'm
we've been
trying to go
this is
through my
all
notes and be like, what
so
was I gonna
interesting.
talk
I have
about?
I don't have a lot of left of like big notes. I have just some
Yeah,
little
some little
things.
ones.
Like I've decided to start calling it Giles' position when he has that thing where he like looks in
sounds
a book
dirty.
and the situation it does, doesn't it? That's the benefit. He looks in some book and then he has like a neatly summarized bit of information to share with everyone. He doesn't have to be like, well, this says this, and that one says that, and that says that. It's already synthesized and summarized for them. So I'm
I
gonna
What
call
love
that
it.
it
Giles'
is
position from
funny
now on.
how he
You should. That's
says,
amazing.
like, what does he say? It's a fringe theory held by a few folklorists that some regional stories have actual, very literal antecedents. And I was just like, that's not really a fringe theory. Like, there
Yeah,
are
that's
quite a few people
and
that
like
think
you would
that
think
fairy tales and folklore are based in reality in some way.
and also you would think
Initially.
as a watcher that he would be like, a story about witches and demons might be true. Like,
Right?
you know?
Like,
Like,
fringe for who, Giles? You vampires are real, and so are
like, come on,
werewolves and
man.
demons. Like,
Yeah.
what?
One of my
Jeez.
other favorite things about this episode is how creepy those little kids are. Like, even though they're like, beautiful, blonde, blue-eyed
Yeah.
little,
Andrew
angels or
in
whatever,
Desperate Housewives, that
they
little
are
boy.
so creepy. And I just wanted to give a shout out to the show Supernatural and that
Yes.
they took the creepy ghost children thing
Oh my
and
gosh.
ran with it.
So
Supernatural
good.
owns that trope.
Those are some of the
So much.
scarier episodes of that show.
Yes. The
Yeah.
woman in white too, with her
Oh,
two little dead
the
kids.
first season is legitimately scary. Like, I
It
still
is.
cannot watch that one in the dark at night. It's
There are
just so
there is one episode of
so good.
Supernatural I've never seen because
Which one?
the first
Which one?
couple of minutes of it is too much for me. Bloody Mary. I can't watch it.
That
Ooh,
episode
it
scares
is
the
so
shit out of
good.
me.
It's so scary. I
It's
can't
so
watch it.
scary.
So good.
I was in
It's
my
too
head
much.
about that as a kid, and when I
Yeah.
first saw that episode, I was just like, I need to watch this in the daytime and then never go near a mirror because it's
So,
not good.
but like this is why like the book banning doesn't work. Like I heard about urban legends from other kids. Like
Yeah.
we didn't read about it, we didn't watch TV. Like
Somehow
kind
we
of like when
felt
Grimm's
the
Fairy Tales
internet.
was passed down.
We
Oh,
all
yeah.
learned
Yeah, this was
some
before the
weird
internet.
rumor about Marilyn Manson. Like, how did
Oh
that happen
yeah.
all over the country,
Or
especially our
if you go back
generation?
earlier to my small
Yeah.
childhood, everyone I know my age believes that if you have Pop Rocks and Coke, your
Yes,
stomach will
We heard about that one
explode.
too.
yes,
We
Like,
heard
I
about that one
remember
too.
how
that.
did that
We
spread
played Bloody Mary. Yep.
everywhere?
Yep.
It's
And
Yeah.
light as a
fascinating.
feather, stiff as a board. We all did
Oh
that.
God,
Yeah. Same.
I got in trouble for doing that.
Well, yeah, it's
Did they think you were a demon?
Oh,
Well,
wait.
my parents also got mad at me when they found out I went to a friend's house and she had a Ouija board
Mm.
because that was a big no-no. which
Yeah,
is funny
that's
because my parents they're complex in what they allowed me to do
Mine
and
too.
watch with the small things that would be a no-no. I was
Yeah.
like, you encouraged me to read Helter Skelter and become a prosecutor or a forensic psychologist when I was 11. And
Yeah.
I don't understand why I can't
play with a Ouija board.
dabble in something that's slightly
Yeah.
occultish.
Because like like logic makes no sense. Like, you know, it's like even like we're gonna ban books with like two dads, but let's keep letting them read Lord of the Flies,
Oh, I
where
probably wouldn't
kids
have been able
murder
to
each
read.
other.
I love
Yeah.
Lord of the Flies.
It's totally
But I probably wouldn't
fine.
have been able to read a book about two dads when I was a kid because, you know,
Yeah, or like
Southern
how many of us read
Baptist.
Romeo and Juliet,
Right.
a murder
Mhm.
Like 5
suicide
times in
pact
school.
And she's
as
Yeah, 5
middle
times in
schoolers,
school.
or Wuthering
Yeah.
Heights. Like, let's talk about toxic
Exactly.
relationship. Like
Yeah,
we
like
all
are we like deconstructing with this stuff here? Like eventually it would take away pretty much everything. So it's like maybe
true.
we just shouldn't do it.
Yeah. Definitely.
Oh, I
Okay.
did there are some really good one-offs, like little one-liners in this episode and quotes. Like I
Yes.
did love you played the quote earlier, Penny, with Giles, and he's flipping out because they're confiscating his books. And Buffy looks at him like, Giles, we need those books. And he's like, yes, obviously. He was like, believe me, I
Yeah.
tried to tell that to the nice man with the big gun.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah. Yeah, it's like use your critical thinking skills, Buffy. Like now is not the time. And one of my
Exactly.
favorite lines that I feel like is so underrated, one of my favorite Angel moments is when he said, I heard about this. People are even talking to me. I was just like, oh, that's good.
So I am so
Brilliant.
glad you brought that up because when I didn't remember that quote, and I told you like I had to pause because I was laughing for like 30 seconds straight.
Yes.
Like I don't know, it really tickled my funny bone. Like when
So
he said that,
funny.
like my brain was like just imagining all of these
Mhm.
situations because Angel is more of a loner to begin
Yeah.
with. So like
I was
I'm
like,
like,
was
who
he
is he
sitting
talking
in
to?
Willie's bar and all of
Yeah,
a sudden
like
these
Yeah, or
strangers are
like the
coming up to be
butcher
like, hey
when he
man.
goes to the butcher to get his blood, and the butcher's
yeah,
like,
Yeah.
"Did you hear about the kids?" Like,
that's what I was.
And
In
David
my
Boreanaz's
mind went
delivery
there.
is
yeah,
Yeah, where I'm just imagining like him going to the butcher or the clothing store or his furniture store that he magically goes to, and them just being like, "Oh, this Eeyore mother
Fish!
here he comes again," and it's just like, it's just, and then like this time they're like, "Oh, good, he's constantly sad and miserable. This is the perfect stuff for him to talk
yeah.
about.
It's
Dead
like, oh,
kids.
by the
This is
way,
right in your wheelhouse, buddy. Like I know how to make small talk with you this time."
you know that
It's just
one playground we have in Sunnydale that has the
yeah.
rusty merry-go-round? Some dead kids were found on the
Yeah.
rusty
One
merry-go-round.
playground, 17
yeah.
cemeteries.
And I like his awareness too.
Yeah,
His awareness is like, they're even talking to me. I'm
yeah.
like,
Mhm.
aw,
Aw,
you know yourself.
you
Miss
broody.
Moody,
Precious.
Mr. Dramatic with his long coat, even though he can't feel temperature.
Yeah.
I think he likes it for the
Yes.
drama.
Oh yeah, and the
When
spiky hair. He does that on purpose.
Oh
he
yeah,
knows
yeah.
what he's
What my sister
doing.
and I used to call sticky uppy hair.
Yes. Crunchy hair.
I have to say, Cordelia in this episode made me very happy. She came in with some comic relief and it inspired me
Yes.
when she finds Giles knocked out and is slapping him to get him to come to. And she's like, one of these days you're going to wake up in a coma. And Giles is just like, wake up in a coma. Like, this is nonsense, but I don't have time to explain that to you right now. And then she says, how many times have you been knocked out anyway? So I went
Yes.
back and I
Oh, you
counted all
counted?
the
Oh,
times
Wow.
Giles has been knocked out so far
That's
in the
amazing.
series. So in the first time was in The Witch,
Mm.
and it was by vampires. This was in season 1. Vampires who want to raise the master again. Giles is knocked out. The second time is also in season 1 in the episode, I believe it's the 5th episode, Never Kill a Boy on the First Date. And he is knocked out by Andrew in the crematorium. This is like Clue. The third time, season 1, that finale prophecy girl, he's knocked out by Buffy who is trying to stop him from trying to help her.
Yes. Yeah.
Then season 2, in the first episode, it's When She Was Bad. In that episode, he's again knocked out by vampires who are trying to raise the master. Then in Passion in season 2, he's knocked out by Angelus after Giles attacks him after, he learns he kills Jenny. Then in Becoming Part 1, he is knocked out by a group of vampires who then take him to Angelus. Then in Beauty and the Beast, also in season 2, he's technically, I didn't know if this one counted, but he's shot with the tranquilizer gun, which knocks him out. So if
and he says bloody priceless, which I love.
Yes.
Which is one of my favorite Buffy lines.
In
Well, from the show.
Homecoming, he is knocked out by Lyle and Candy, that kind of hickish vampire couple. And then in Revelations, he is knocked out by Gwendolyn Post in his office. And then we have him here in Gingerbread for the 10th time in 3 seasons, being knocked out by the Moo Mob coming in to take Buffy away. I was just like, this is insane how many times this man has actually been rendered unconscious. Like, this is not safe. This is not good.
Definitely
At least it was with
CTE.
chloroform this time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, at least it was with chloroform this time. But it can't be good. Our brain doesn't like that automatic shutdown.
No. Poor Giles.
Yeah, he's definitely a CTE. No
been
wonder he
through it.
makes the weird decision to leave his Slayer
Right?
and go back to England. I know
Damaged.
Anthony had to leave, but like,
Well, and
Spoilers!
poor, I love that the writers
sorry.
basically use, spoiler alert. I love that the writers basically use Cordelia to call this out and kind of wink at the fans who have been
She's
paying
a truth
attention.
teller.
Yes.
They give Cordelia a
which I
lot
love.
of truth
Oh,
moments.
Also, I have that
And then Anya.
hairspray that they find in her
Oh,
locker.
the $45
it's
imported
TGI
hairspray?
bedhead, and it's like $15 or $20 if you're in some bougie Target. But yeah, it is not where I was just like, hey, that's in my bathroom right now.
You got it on sale for $50.
Yeah, it's like, oh, come on, Cordy.
That does make me wonder about something. That I wonder if that was like a little like breadcrumb.
Right?
But we can talk about more in the spoiler section.
Like, oh, this will be funny.
But I like the where he goes, we need to help Buffy before like to save her from Hansel and Gretel or something. And she goes, so just to be clear, the brain damage happened before I hit you.
Yeah. So good.
Oh, Oz and Xander are awkward together, and then
Yeah,
Yeah,
all the little callbacks.
Yeah.
I haven't
Oh my
seen you all
gosh.
day. Where you been? When he's talking to Willow, and Xander's like, not with me. No, sir. Ask anyone.
Yeah.
Nope. Mm-mm.
I know, and I had that written down too. Of he's like burrito. It's like way
Yeah.
to go on the apology, Xander. That's pretty in character there. And then I did wonder watching it, like Amy, when she's sitting there, does she know why it's suddenly weird at lunch? Like Xander, Willow, Oz, and does she know why
That had
it's
to have
weird?
come out in like
Yeah.
the grapevine.
Because like she was just kind of
gossip.
sitting there, like in her head, is she like, the hell is going on right now? Like,
Right.
okay, I'm gonna eat by myself tomorrow. Like, but that makes more sense that the rumor mill got started.
Because
And
everyone
then,
knew about Xander and Cordy, so they probably
Yes.
also knew about Willow and Oz.
Makes
That
sense.
makes sense.
And then the opening, I also lost it when Joyce was being like Slayer,
Oh, yeah.
Slayer,
Get it,
like
honey!
cheerleader. Yeah, and then she goes, oh, that's Mr. Sanderson from the bank. I don't know why I lost it. It made me laugh. Maybe
Because
the
it's
delivery, 'cause
classic
it cracked
And the
Joyce.
me up.
thermos.
It's like
She brings the thermos.
Joyce
like,
is
she's
always
just-
she's always Joyce. Like she's just always Joyce, and I love her so much.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it's like she's at a soccer game with Buffy. Like,
Yeah.
oh, hit him, honey. And it's like not like a fight with a demon for her life. And
He's getting
just
away.
so
I
good.
know.
I know.
Like, thank you, mother.
And then
I can see that.
Yeah, and then someone with a soul did this. Yeah, that is somehow worse, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which, like, I mean, demons, and then
Mhm.
it really is like it is somehow worse. And then I also laughed a lot when Giles and Joyce reunited at the
Hmm.
moo
Oh
meeting.
yeah.
So
Like the
awkward.
sheer
Oh,
awkwardness of it. And
it's been
they
a
were
while.
standing so close. Yeah.
Yeah. Not
They were
not
standing
since
so close.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And he was like, "Not since, not since." And it's like, "I saw you naked."
Yeah.
Like, yeah, things are never quite the same after you've seen someone's O face, huh, Giles?
Mhm.
Like, it's just, oh, it's so awkward. And then
Twice.
yeah,
Top of a
twice,
cop car.
twice. Yeah. And then Willow's mom, I was like, "Oh, this makes sense on why Willow is so focused on her academics." I mean, yeah, Willow's smart, and obviously she got a little bit from her mom in genetics and also works really hard. But that's why, her mom's like focusing on facts and statistics and not even picking up on the other two adults having some tension. She's like, "Actually, that reminds me." So you can tell this mom is like
Mhm.
very much like train of thought, like the Big Bang Theory mom. And then it makes sense why Willow is so devastated by her lack of a perfect SAT score, because it's how she connects to her
It's
mom
the
and finds
only
value in herself, her
it's
mom's
yeah,
values.
it's her primary source of validation is
Yeah.
academic achievement. And
Yeah.
I can identify with that. My parents were not huge validators, but
Mm,
academic achievement was something that like was sort of praised in our house. And
mhm.
so I cared about my grades more than most people because I was like, well, it's like the one thing my parents even notice. So,
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair to them, there were 8 of us. So, you know, they had a lot of
They had a
kids
whole
to pay
team.
attention to. Uh,
But still, like, that's
I
still hard.
yeah.
I will say I know this is also polarizing, but I die laughing every time Buffy uses the giant stake that she's tied
Oh,
to
yeah.
like
I
impale the demon. She's
know.
going like, did I get it? Did I get
That
it?
made me laugh too. I have that written
The
down.
way she
I mean,
delivers it is
it's objectively funny.
perfect. Yes. And
It
this
is.
giant demon. I was like, oh
And
my god,
also
this
that she has to
episode.
remind Cordelia to put out the fire, right?
Yeah.
Cordelia's
Yeah.
having so much
Like,
fun
The
Cordy.
blasting all the
fire.
people with the hose. Buffy's like, "We're burning to death over here."
Yeah, it's like
So
fire. She's like,
good.
"Oh, right."
Oh, yeah, fire.
That's kind of important.
And then
So
I also did put down like, "Xander, why is your porn at school?" And then but also Giles is all of us on computers. Like,
Yeah.
I very little will make me that mad.
it was
He's
so
like, "And I
funny.
will call you," what did he say, like a fad? FAD?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Like,
fad.
I
fad.
get it, but it's
Yeah.
like a, like a popular thing or whatever, but that's an insult in England? Like,
Well, I think
"You're a fad." "That's
He's
right, I'll say it
saying
again."
the
the idea
internet
is that it won't be
basically
around much
taking over
longer.
books. Yeah. It's like, you're a
Yeah.
fad.
Oh, Giles.
It's
Yeah.
precious.
Sorry,
That was all I was
Giles.
kinda thinking
I
about. Yeah.
also found him very attractive when he was yelling at the computer. So
Yeah.
maybe I'm just
I
attracted to
know.
Giles.
Sexy
I
Giles,
think so
man.
Yep.
too. Yeah, when that Ripper part of his personality comes out.
Like when
I
he
did not feel that
shoves
way when I was a
Snyder up
child.
against the door. When that one
Sir.
I was like, okay,
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Hi, daddy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
He's like, I
exactly.
volunteer.
and I don't even usually say daddy that way, but like,
I don't
mhm,
either.
yum.
No.
It's like it fits though. It's the same way it's like Pedro Pascal kind of
Oh
fits it.
right.
It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I get it now.
He's
And
so
if you guys
charming
have
and
not watched
goofy.
Echo, the Marvel series on Disney
So
Plus, Chasky
good.
Spencer, who plays Uncle Henry.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Right?
Oh, and fun
Oh my
fact, Pedro
gosh.
Pascal is in season 4 of Buffy.
I
I don't think
know.
that's too big of a
Oh,
spoiler, so
We're
I
getting
that's
there
know.
soon.
a
It's so
fun
exciting.
tie-in.
Yeah, he's in the
So
very first
exciting.
episode, so that's
Yeah.
gonna
Precious.
be
Oh my gosh.
exciting, and
Amazing.
we will celebrate it appropriately when the time comes.
Mhm.
Yes, I love it.
Okay, I think it's time that we get
Trivia
into
time.
some trivia.
Woohoo.
Yay.
Sam, as our guest, you get to go first.
Oh, this episode marks the only appearance of Willow's mom, Sheila. And I'm not really upset about that.
That's funny. I was about to say I'm kind of sad about that.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. We can have.
It's
I mean,
so
I
funny.
adore Willow, and I had a hard time seeing a character that didn't.
Yeah.
So
She
I mean,
explains so
obviously she loves
much.
her daughter,
She
but like,
it,
I'm like,
she
I like
explains so
Joyce
much,
better.
though. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, she does.
So that
This
actor is
next one is
named.
also kind of spoilery for the future, but it's not a huge
Mm.
deal.
Yeah.
Oh,
That
cool.
actor is named Jordan Baker, and she played Sheila Rosenberg, and she also portrayed Charlie in the show Passions, which we will find out in season 4
Six.
is
No, it's
and
4.
5 that it is
Oh.
Spike's favorite soap opera.
I love it
Yes, because
so
of
much.
course it is.
Yeah.
Precious.
Of course it is. Him and my grandma. I can just imagine them like hanging out with each other, talking about it.
Mhm.
Yep.
He totally would be down too.
Oh, he would. They would have a lot in common. She's like, I lived through the Great Depression, and
He'll
he's
be
like,
like, me
samesies.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too. Gosh. Another fun fact about some of the props and production in this episode, one of the names on the newspaper articles, one of the bylines about the 2 dead children is C. Meyer, which is most likely a reference to Carrie Meyer, one of the series production designers. His name has been snuck in a few times before on the props and in the episode, so now I'm going to kind of keep an eye out for that in the future. See when I see him pop up
Very
again.
nice. Oh, very nice. And Elizabeth Ann Allen, who played Amy Madison, stated that while filming Gingerbread, I was being burned on a pyre. It was my birthday, and when they lit me up, they yelled, "Fire in the hole!" And up everybody started to sing "Happy Birthday."
That's
Jokesters.
hilarious.
That is quite a candle,
She's
ma'am.
like
That's
her own
amazing.
birthday candle.
And I love this one.
Yeah.
Ironically, for an episode with a message criticizing censorship, the BBC censored the scene when Buffy stakes the demon through the throat.
Jesus.
That is
Come on, guys.
ridiculous.
They
Yeah.
don't censor the
that
image of
sounds
the
about
dead
right.
children at the beginning. But
This is where the hypocrisy comes in.
yeah, a stake through a very, very fake demon that
Yeah.
draws a line.
It's like how
Probably
they
because a woman did
censored
it.
they
Crosses the
censored
line.
in the BBC that scene where Giles hotwires a car.
Oh yeah. One of
It's
my
like
favorite little bits on John Oliver's show is whenever, whenever there's something in Parliament in Great Britain, if you're mocking it, you cannot show that on television. So he'll show, what his actual segment is, mocking Parliament in Great Britain, and then show something absolutely ridiculous and nonsensical that his audience in Britain will see
oh, that's funny.
instead. It makes me so happy every time.
Oh my
I
gosh.
this is a major tangent, but my dream job is to be one of the lawyers that figures out
Yes.
just how far John Oliver can go on that
Oh my
show.
gosh.
Like
That
when
would
they
be
created their own
amazing.
church. Like, oh. And he's like,
100%.
somehow
That
this
was
is
so
legal.
good.
I'm like, oh, that's a great job.
That is a great job. I do
Yay.
want that job.
All
Love
right.
Man too.
Amazing.
This brings us to the part of the episode where I ask, does it still slay? Sam?
Unfortunately, I think all the things that we were talking about shows it does still slay. Though, for me at least, those themes are still very present in our everyday situation, and I can all but promise you this would absolutely keep repeating itself. And I thought the episode did a great job of pulling people in to a very challenging phenomenon. And also, I just find it very funny when Xander and Oz fall out of that
Yeah.
ceiling and we're here to save you. So
Seriously.
for me it does.
I like that Oz delivered it instead of
Yes.
Xander with his just like dryness.
Like
It made
fully
it
aware
so
of
much
how
funnier.
ridiculous it is to
Yeah.
say it. Right. Kara, does it
Fine.
still slay for you?
Oh, 100%. It will always be relevant and topical because of the way society seems to cycle through these, eras of censorship and oppression and whatnot. But I also just love it. I'm neurodivergent, so I tend to hyperfixate on things. And after Titanic in the 4th grade, in the 5th grade, it became the Salem Witch Trials. So
Mhm.
anything that is vaguely associated with the Salem Witch Trials, I love. And you combine that with Buffy, I am all in. All
Eh,
in.
It's a
Nice.
hat trick.
So good.
I
Yep.
absolutely think it still slays. It's super relevant. It's still really funny. It's got a lot of great
Mhm.
moments, and it's got an important message. So
It is
it
funny.
slays.
So
And
good.
a little like add-on of at the opposite of groupthink happening, I had actually met Nicholas Brendan
Oh
at one
yeah.
of the Comic Cons, and not the official ones. It was in South Florida, and I
Mhm.
was for my school newspaper. I was reporting on the South Florida version of Comic Con, and I saw that he was there, and I got super excited. I mean, I think I was like young, but not too young. I think I was like 18, 19, 20, like
Mhm.
around there. And so there was a lot of people gathered around, obviously the Buffy fan base. And this must have been like 2010, 2011.
Oh
And Nicholas
gosh.
Brendan had just done a guest starring role on Private Practice where he played a
Oh, I
rapist on
can't
it.
handle
Oh,
that
And
episode.
I mean, it is like really, really for
Mhm.
everyone who is a fan and hasn't seen those episodes, please be mindful. It is
I can't
hauntingly
rewatch it.
accurate, but it is, yeah, it's extremely upsetting and triggering.
Mm.
So, but those episodes had just come out or something like that, and I was amazed at how different his character was from what I remembered Xander to be. So I went up to the podium and I like asked my question. I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's Xander!" Like, I mean, I knew it was Nicholas Brendan, but I
Yeah.
get up there and I was gonna ask him about his interest in different TV shows, having played such a like the opposite end of Buffy's loyal sidekick. And so I get up there and I bring up, I obviously really liked him in Buffy, and then I said, in your role in Private Practice, I thought you just did an amazing job playing such a different character. And anyone who's been to cons knows there's like bright lights on you, everyone's attention is on you. I'm holding the microphone, and I said that, and he interrupts and he goes, "What? You liked that character?" He goes,
It's
and
like
then
that's
he
not what
goes,
I
"You."
said.
I know. He goes like, "What? You liked that character? What? You want to be raped?"
oh,
In front of
Yeah.
everyone.
Cool,
And
Nicholas Brendan.
you're like, that is not what I said.
I know. And I was
Listening skills,
superly
sir.
humiliated. I was like, because it was in a big crowd.
And you were a
And so,
teenager, right? So
yeah, like, I mean, I definitely was. I mean, if you did it to me now, I'd be like, sit down, sir.
What did he
But
get
like, but I
arrested
mean,
for?
oh,
was
yeah.
drunk
So, like,
driving or
He
something?
and I share the same birthday, by the way, so
oh my
I had
goodness.
done like Google
Yeah.
searches on him before.
So he had like I didn't know it at the time, but he's had a long history of struggling with substance abuse and DUIs and domestic violence
That's
and
right.
and
That's
and
what
all of
made me be
this.
like,
Yeah. So
mm,
he's kind of been through some stuff.
yeah,
And I didn't know that at the time. And he's been known to be intoxicated at these panels. So,
yeah.
like I don't think he's a bad person by any means. But he said that
He's
and I
got
was
some
so
issues.
humiliated and kind of scared because I was in front of like a whole, not that he would do anything, but that
Well,
was in front of an
it's
entire
such
crowd.
a weird response.
Like,
Like,
did
He
this male celebrity just ask me in front of a crowd if I wanted to be raped? Like,
yeah,
metaphorically or not? Like, I mean,
yeah.
I was just like, huh, and
that
like, and
is
so,
not the first type of
yeah,
story or account that I have heard that is similar
really,
about
And
him.
he
Yeah.
probably was drunk or
really,
something because
Yeah.
he didn't hear you correctly and he, said
Yeah.
something stupid.
well, like, really, and like,
That
and I
sounds like
remember
drunk to me.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
like
Who
and I
knows?
remember like being scared because I was in front of a crowd too, but the crowd turned on him.
Yeah.
Like you could hear, I mean, this is a
Mm.
Buffy crowd. This is not the crowd to do it in.
Yeah,
And
no,
so like,
not so
female
much.
empowerment and support. And so people were like booing a little bit. Like it wasn't like a whole thing, but they're like, "Ugh," like you could, and I think he sensed that change. I mean, also my face like just went super white because it
It's
was
like, well,
like,
that's not
ugh,
how
like
I expected this to go.
Yeah.
I was like my first Comic Con, and I was like, and then he kind of like you could tell he didn't know where to go. So of course, being a woman, I wanted to rescue him from attacking me in front of a crowd.
That
But I said,
conditioning's great.
and
Huh.
I was just like, so any other shows that you'd be interested in doing? And so like just like so I was surprised. Like I was surprised because I went to my second version of Comic Con in Orlando, and that was really on my mind. And this is a long time later,
Mm.
like 14 years later, and I was thinking about how upsetting that was for me. And then I met Ewan McGregor, who was a delight, and that
Aw,
was a nice
that makes me
reparative
happy.
experience for me.
That's good to
But
know.
yeah, Yeah, so I don't think he's a bad person. Obviously, has some other stuff going on, but knowing that experience, that one-off, I mean, briefly not even meeting one-on-one, but like having that experience and then watching Xander now, it is tough for me at times to watch him because it's like, and then knowing that JW was a big fan of his, wanted him to be in Firefly and everything. Yeah,
It's like it gives you
Checks
the ick,
out.
right? It's like,
it does.
Yeah.
It does. And I kept so I'm on season 7 and because I've been like now marathoning it, he actually doesn't get much better.
Yeah,
Like
grows, but not.
it's yeah, fractionally, but he's still I guess spoilers. But
Yeah.
like, it's still not like I'm on 7 and I'm like, ugh.
yeah,
Like sure, like stop.
yeah. And
So
in the
I
Xander needs to
comics,
stop
he ends
very
up getting
frequently.
together with Dawn, and they have a baby, and
I hate
yeah.
it.
ugh,
I hate
Which is so icky on so many levels.
Yeah.
so
So
gross.
icky. And then, finding out that Michelle Trachtenberg had said like JW was not allowed to be in a room alone with her.
Yeah, yeah. It's all
She was a
creepy.
teenager. Yeah. So, whew.
Blah.
But yeah, that was just my
Good
little
Your
times.
Nicholas
Buffy
Brindon
experience.
experience.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So speaking of fans, let's head over to the Bronze, get some bloomin' onions,
Woohoo.
and listen to what our listeners thought of the episode.
Bronze things. Things of bronze.
Jolene said, I know I missed the immense feedback, but totally agree with what you were saying about Joyce in the podcast. I didn't appreciate her properly at first either, but watching now as an adult and parent, you can fully see that the reason Buffy manages to live beyond 18, not counting the couple of temporary deaths, is because of her support network. This episode is another brilliant episode. Season 3 is just full of them. Agreed. This is almost probably definitely in my top 10. I love that.
That's Whedonese right there.
Yeah. Almost
I love
probably
it.
definitely.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I love the whole concept of using the fairy tale mixed with a bit of 1980s Satanic Panic. You should love this episode of the podcast, then, Jolene. She said, I always love it when shows have a play on the old fairy tales. Massive Once Upon a Time and Grimm fan here. Yes. I'm going to rewatch Grimm now. Gotta love Joyce trying to bond with Buffy over slang, and the disbelief over Mr. Sanderson from the bank is brilliant. I have always wondered if Hansel and Gretel were always planning on showing up that night, or if it was because they needed Joyce or another adult to see them. Bit of an insight into how much Willow's parents don't really bother with her when she says about being glad her mom doesn't know about her extracurricular activities or even knowing her curricular activities, not knowing she'd had her hair cut months ago, and not even knowing her best friend's name. Bunny Summers? I love that part.
And I love how Buffy didn't even correct her. She's like,
No,
so
she's
not
like, all
worth
right.
it.
Yeah.
Just call me
Cool.
Bunny.
What is it with Sunnydale parents, with the exception of Joyce being rubbish? Are you British? Did I not know this? Is Jolene
I think
British?
Jolene is British, yeah.
Jolene, will you leave us a
Nice.
voicemail?
Yes.
I love this. Hellmouth rubbing off on them. They're hardly the most nurturing lot.
Oh,
Willow's parents ignore her. Xander's are abusive. Slight spoiler, if you want to skip ahead 15 minutes. Cordelia's dad goes 15 minutes, 15 seconds. Don't skip 15 minutes. Cordelia's dad goes bankrupt. Amy's mom swapped bodies with her. I do love that
Yeah,
episode.
that's a lot of
Yeah.
spectacularly bad
Really
parenting.
Crappy
I wonder
parenting.
if it's like the parents in Dairy, like how
Right?
they were just terrible.
Seriously, they were
Yeah.
all awful. Maybe it's
Yeah.
Hellmouthy too, kind of like how the
Yeah.
Horcruxes in Harry Potter
Like make
influence the
people into horrible
behavior
people.
of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe
Yeah.
the Hellmouth influences people living there.
That
Anyway,
would make sense.
she said, "I
Gotta
loved."
make sure they stay.
Yeah. Keep them drawn in. She said, I loved Xander being outraged about being asked about where Willow is and then knowing where she is anyway. Also, being a
That was
typical
good.
teenage boy with Playboys in his locker. How 90s having magazines, though. Yeah, normal
Oh,
teenage boys
yeah.
these days look at their porn on the internet. Snyder really makes me laugh in this one. He's still a horrible little weasel, but his joy at the locker search, I love the smell of desperate librarian in the morning, and that would be the founder. I believe you call her mom. Comments to Buffy are comedy. Buffy's reaction to her mom being in charge of Moo is great too. Nice acronym, mom. Willow trying to get a reaction out of her mom. I worship Beelzebub. I do his bidding. Do you see any goats around? No, because I sacrificed them all. But it's the I'm dating a musician that gets the shock. That is great. We
Of course it
didn't
does.
touch on that. Amy the rat. Another spoiler, skip ahead 15 seconds. If only she knew how long she'd be in that cage. And then the quote of, did I get it? Did I get it? As Xander and Oz crash through the ceiling, and then the we're here to save you is one of the funniest moments in the entire 7 series.
Totally
But
agree.
my favorite conversation in this episode is Cordelia, after slapping Giles across the face repeatedly. Things are way out of control, Giles. First the thing at school, and then my mom confiscates all of my black clothes and scented candles. That was a great line. I came over here to tell Buffy to stop this craziness and found you all unconscious. Again, how many times have you been knocked out anyway? I swear one of these times you're gonna wake up in a coma. And then Giles, wake up in a... Oh, never mind. We need to save Buffy from Hansel and Gretel. That is a wild exchange. And Cordelia then says, now let's be clear. The brain damage happened before I hit you. She said, anyway, sorry for the lecture. Don't apologize. Another great episode coming next week.
Oh,
Thank you,
yes, it
Julie.
is.
Yes.
Helpless, one of my
Great
all-time
points.
favorites.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, that one's so good.
Oh.
From Becky, hello all. Thoughts on season 3, episode 11. Joyce was unbelievably cute cheering Buffy on while patrolling. That's Mr. Sanderson from the bank. I totally agree with you. It totally got me. Willow's face when talking to Buffy about Joyce supporting her broke my heart. Absentee parents. Sad face. That whole conversation she and her mom had was so sad. Though her mom calling Buffy Bunny, the whole episode was great. Joyce and Giles getting flustered every time they run into each other never gets old. Yeah, that's the I seen you naked awkwardness.
It's fantastic.
I laughed out loud when the mayor promised never again to the town, like he's not about to try and eat the entire senior class. That's amazing. It's so true. He's like, I'm about to eat all of your children.
I don't care what happens to them between now and then, as long as there's enough to eat.
That is amazing. So true. Mean Principal Snyder. Oh, how I've missed you. Oz walking with Willow to Snyder's office. Heart. Oz, sweet moment of the week. New segment, maybe? Winky face.
Maybe.
Oh, yeah. Buffy scaring the bullies away. Girl power. Yeah, that was really nice. I needed a Buffy in my school. Moo. Just laugh emojis. Crying laughing emojis. Buffy's comments to Angel about fighting evil but never winning were deep. Oof. Yeah, I feel that too as a psychologist.
Yeah.
It's like, whew, this world. Giles yelling at the computer, laughing emoji. Yes, that was amazing. I can't believe I forgot Joyce chloroformed Buffy when she and Willow's mom were casually bonding before setting their daughters on fire was so funny. It was very good. I had also forgotten. That's a good point. I had also forgotten that it was Joyce that chloroformed Buffy.
Yeah.
Wonder how those conversations went. Cordy was a hoot. Her and Giles' moments together were priceless. Buffy having to remind her to spray fire instead of spraying the townsfolk. Laughing emoji. Why were they setting them on fire inside the building?
Right.
Yeah.
Was no one worried about burning the place down? Shrug. This is how you know it's emotion mind.
Yeah.
There's no logic. The best part of the episode was Xander and Oz crashing through the ceiling. We're here to save you. A lot of excellent comedy in this episode. Totally agree. Poor Amy. I love how they continue with this storyline. Really like the villain in this one. Cool mystery for the gang to solve. Favorite quote, Cordy to Giles. How many times have you been knocked out anyway? I swear, one of these days you're going to wake up in a coma.
10 times.
Great. Yes, 10. There we go. We got it. Great running joke and mentioning a coma.
Ooh,
Spoiler.
Yep.
Skip 15 seconds. Foreshadowing for what happens with her on Angel.
Beep.
I mean, using
Oh,
comas on
oh.
TV shows is
Oh, I'm
pretty
thinking it was
tropey. It
very
happens a lot.
soapy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right.
Like,
Yeah,
interesting.
Buffy, the wrath of Moo. When she goes to stab the demon. Did I get it? I like this one. Great metaphor for how some are quick to anger over things they don't understand or agree with, and because of ignorance, innocent people get hurt. Sad that
Yeah.
it's 2024 and we're still having a battle with books.
For
So
real.
many being removed from schools and libraries. Solid episode. Good balance of serious and fun. Have a great week. Grr. Arr. That was
Yay.
amazing, Becky.
Thanks,
That was
Becky.
great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And we got an email from Dave
I'm so excited
who
about
says,
this.
"Hello, Penny and Kara. Thanks for the Buffy podcast. Enjoying it so far. You mentioned that you wanted to hear from any folks watching Buffy for the first time. I am one of those folks. Yay!
I love
What?
it.
Yay! Oh, I'm so jealous. You're gonna have such an amazing experience.
I know. So much
I
good
hope
stuff
you
coming.
listened to our spoiler warnings and skipped ahead
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah.
I missed Buffy when it came out, had always heard references to it being a great show. Now that it's on streaming and there's a podcast to follow along with it, figured now was as good a time as any to try it out.
Absolutely.
Watching Angel along with it, and currently at season 4, episode 2 of Buffy, and season 1, episode 2 of Angel, watching in broadcast order. Will be a bit
Nice.
before I catch up to the podcast. Wanted to say thank you for giving the spoiler warning and keeping the rewatch part spoiler free for those of us starting from the beginning. Keep
Aw.
up the great work. Dave. And
Thank
Dave,
you,
when you get to this
Dave.
episode in several weeks, thank
Yeah.
you so much for your email. We really
Yeah.
appreciate
We're
it.
very happy to have you.
It's amazing. You're in for such a great time.
All right. That is the end of the main section of the podcast. Stay tuned for the Watcher's Diaries at the end if you want to hear all the spoilery talk.
If you'd like to join the conversation, you can find all of our contact information at podcastica.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/podcastica or our Still Slaying Facebook page or on Instagram at stillslayingcast. You can also send an email or a recorded voice message to stillslayingfeedback@gmail.com.
And you'll find all this information at podcastica.com. It's also in the show notes. And on podcastica.com, you'll also find links to social media pages and, more importantly, all the other fantastic Podcastica podcasts that you can choose from to follow. There are many. And right now, I'm very excited about the new Walking Dead spinoff, The Ones Who Live, which some people call the Rick and Michonne Show, and they're covering that on The Cast of Us, and that's been great. And there's so many other great podcasts to follow. What are you two listening to these days?
I dove in with the new Rick and Michonne show.
Yeah.
Like that, I could not wait to listen to that. And I think I had mentioned last week that I was going through and re-listening to Yellow Jackets because I just miss that show so much. And I'm still doing that. And it's making me want to do another rewatch of the series.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, there's so many shows I want to watch right now. But I think I'm ready to get sucked in again. It's been a while. And I'm having some entertainment withdrawal from that show. So I might start doing the Yellow Jackets rewatch to go along with my re-listen.
Nice.
There you go. Yeah, I'm following Run for Your Lives. They have a new season
Nice.
that's back up, which is fantastic.
That is a
And the
good one.
Lokiverse, the companion podcast. I had no self-control and finished the Echoverse TV series like within a day and a half. So the podcasts are amazing to follow along. And as usual, I always end up appreciating the show so much more. And then the From podcast is also fantastic.
Yes.
Talk about people we need to get more into this show.
Seriously.
From is such a good
It
show.
really is. It's
From the
addictive.
makers of Lost. I mean, it's really, really fantastic. And I think they're filming season 2 right now. If I think
3.
so, and then the rewatch is great.
Isn't it season
Yep.
3?
3? Yep,
Yes.
3.
Yeah.
Sorry, wait. I thought 3. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
This is where my brain goes. Thank you. Season 3, and I'm super excited for it. So yeah, those have been that and watching reality TV. So.
That was quite the cliffhanger at the end of season 2. It reminds me of the hatch at the end of season 1
Of
and
Lost.
Lost.
Yeah.
I'm just like, what is happening?
Yeah, I know, it's so good. And I am starting to see a lot of similar themes so far to Lost, where the fans have a lot of great theories of reading into every little nook and cranny, and that is
Well, and with Harold
90% that they don't follow through with, which is
Yeah,
fine.
That's fine.
So it's always an interesting kind of thing to navigate, and it's really so good. Like, the acting is phenomenal too, and the podcast is amazing. They've had some of the actors on the show.
Almost
They did
all
a
of
great
them.
job getting
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Oh man. Well, if you like what we do, hit like, follow, and subscribe. Leave a 5-star rating if you're feeling like it. And next time, tune in for season 3, episode 12, Helpless, which I know we are all very excited for, especially Penny. Thanks, everyone, and
What is this?
A doodle. I do doodle. You too.
you do doodle too.
All right. That is the end of the non-spoiler section. If you want to avoid spoilers, you should stop listening right now. Just stop.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
That's enough time for you to stop. Time for the Watcher's Diaries. All spoilers all the time.
It's too bad we can't sneak a look at the Watcher Diaries. I'm sure it's full of fun facts to know and tell.
Yeah. That's too bad. That stuff is private.
Also, Giles keeps them in his office, in his personal files.
Most importantly, it would be wrong.
Love it.
So we alluded to it a little bit earlier, but Cordelia is eventually going to end up in a coma on Angel, and it's not for really great story reasons. It's because she was having backstage problems with Joss Whedon, and it sucks
Because he's a dick.
they really shortchanged her character in the
Mhm.
end there. Otherwise, this episode also gives us the beginning of Amy the Rat.
I
Which-
love this bit
It
throughout the series.
like Amy's gonna be a rat for like 3 more seasons.
I
Well,
know.
briefly in Something Blue, when
Oh,
everything
right.
Willow is saying is true,
Right.
she turns her back into a human for like a split second, and you see poor naked Amy on the bed being like, and then boom, back to a rat.
Yeah. There is
That
a
is
scene in the
awesome.
first or second episode of Extraordinary that I swear is a direct reference to Amy the Rat being turned into a human for a second. There's a character who is a cat, but he's actually a man, and he turns himself into a man for like a second, and he's like,
Thackeray Binks.
and then he's like, no, and then he's a cat again.
I like how we have very similar wavelengths.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I read this a couple of years back. I think,
Sam,
but
your
it's so
sound sounds really weird and echoey all of a sudden.
Can you hear me better?
Yes. Oh, maybe your
Yes.
mic was just in the wrong place. Okay.
When the microphone's like, she's too loud and talks too much, I'm gonna go over here. But I read this a while ago, and it seems it's something that still sticks with me. Willow has the power to bring on oh gosh, wrong character, to bring Amy back into a human being, from college. She gets super powerful, but she doesn't do it until she's lonely because Tara broke up with her.
Yeah.
And that is true. Right now, I think we can pretty much say
But
she's not
wow.
powerful enough, but when she gets together with Tara, she
Yeah.
is powerful enough, and
Well, that's the
like, and it
irony
never.
of this episode too.
Yeah, like she
Like,
never
mm,
does it. And
Yeah.
then until she's lonely and like, oh, I just gave it a shot now. I'm like, why didn't you do it? You take her everywhere. Like
yeah.
she's in her rat year, she's in the cage in your dorm room and in, in the home. So I'm like, no, that's not that. That's a weird thing, writers. That's not how Willow would typically act. But okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I
And then
like tracing, all the references throughout the series of Willow floating a pencil, and we see floating a pencil and spinning, and like it's kind of the beginning of her magical development, and it's referenced a couple more times. We see it later on in this season, I think in Doppelgangland, and
Mm.
maybe one other episode,
She
but
floats a pencil at the beginning of Enemies.
oh
Or
yeah,
no,
that too.
Choices. It's
Choices.
Choices.
Choices is the other one. Yes.
Yeah, where
Yep.
she spins
Okay.
the
Okay.
pencil, and then we later see her use that ability to stake a vampire with a wooden pencil,
Yeah. And
Yes.
which
then
is
So good.
awesome.
So
later,
good.
once Anya is introduced, I think it's a season 5 episode where she mentions to Anya, like, trying to convince her to do spells with her. She's like, you could be floating pencils by the end of the day. So that's like clearly a marker of, beginner
Yeah.
magic, getting the hang of it. And I
Yeah.
love how they carry that through. And then when Willow first meets Tara, and they kind of come together, and there's this spark between them. Together they end up being able to move a vending machine,
Hmm.
and
Mhm.
I just love that being the beginning of their relationship.
I
And Willow
know.
has always been like, I want to float something bigger than a pencil one day, like it'll happen. And then her connection with Tara and their powers together allow her to do it. It just, I would like to stay in that place in my brain about Tara and Willow's relationship.
I
Yeah.
know.
I
And oh,
It
sorry.
comes up again in the end of season 5 when Willow has figured out a way to get Tara's brain back. And then
Aw.
and then Tara, like fresh from this recovery, she and Willow grab hands and like part all the people so that Buffy can get
Yeah,
through to go save Dawn. And it's just this awesome moment where they hold hands and their
it's
powers just
so
like
good.
boom.
Yes.
So
So
And it,
good.
cool.
it shows like, and I like how it doesn't happen. Like she doesn't step into the full strength of her powers and where she wants to be with those powers until she meets the love of her life, has
Mm-hmm.
the identity that she was always born with, and like she steps into herself and into quote unquote her power and into who she is and who she's always been. And she couldn't
Yeah.
have done it with Oz. She
Right.
did it when she found Tara. So yeah, it's just such a wonderful allegory or, kind of like it
Yeah.
was just really amazing.
Well, and
And
carrying
then
on that,
yeah.
that theme throughout the show, that those who you love and having those connections make you stronger and more
Yes.
powerful. And it's, plain as day with literally with Willow and Tara. Ugh.
Absolutely. And then Tara's death actually makes her completely spin out and she ends up absorbing the techs of powers that are not hers to tap into. And that's kind of how it continues on, and she's overwhelmed with vengeance. That's it doesn't give her healing, and it's only when
Yeah.
Xander shows up and is able to connect to her
With love.
humanness, that with
Yeah.
love, yeah, exactly, with love, which Giles had
Mm-hmm.
used witchy power to from the coven in England, for her to absorb it, knowing that that would kind of, because that's earth magic, would bring her a little bit more back to herself. And then Xander's love is what brought the real Willow out, of
Yeah.
like, that's right, this is pain and you can't run from it.
So beautiful.
It's so amazing. Like, I mean, her
It's
character is just
definitely
such
the
an amazing
best
one.
Xander moment, right? Where he
Yes.
realizes
He
he's
actually
Yeah.
like,
saves
I
the
have to
day.
be with
Yeah.
Willow right now, even if she's
Yeah.
going to end the world. I love her, and that's where I want to be.
And her broken yellow crayon.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. I'm
So
not going to be
sweet.
able to
I know.
function
Yeah.
in some of these later.
I know.
There's always going to be crying. And
There are a few in particular that I'm just like, oh, shit.
there are some episodes that are
Yeah,
going to be
I
really
have.
hard to cover. The body is going to be brutal.
Oh,
Yeah,
And
man.
Help. I just watched Help. That was a rough one. For some reason, that one
Oh,
always
gosh.
gets to me.
which one is Help?
Help is the one with Azura Sky where she's Cassie and she gets the premonition of her
Oh,
death.
yeah, that's
That's a
rough.
great episode, though.
I
It's
love it
just
so much. It
For
makes me cry. I
me,
just watched it the other night. I still
it's
cried.
Conversations with Dead People when Joyce
Yes.
appears to Dawn.
I
Oh
just
my
watched that.
God. That is
It's
so
so
brutal.
powerful. Yeah, like I mean the first is I know there's a lot of differing opinions. The first is
I
brutal. Like those
love the
psychological ones, I mean it's just
Yeah.
so good and so painful and another kind of and I was wondering if this episode hinted at this other part of the episode of where Cordy's dad goes bankrupt for
Yeah.
not paying his
Yeah.
taxes. And where like she said, like, that's my $45 of hairspray. And
Yeah.
Kara, you see it of like, it's $15. I'm like, is she still pretending? Like we see her later on
Oh, I
pretending
love that
in
take
the
Yeah.
on
dress
it.
store.
I would
Yeah.
much rather it be that than
Then that they got it wrong.
than them
Then
just being like a bunch of male,
I
probably
was just
prop
thinking that.
guys being
Like
like, oh,
men have
this
no
is
idea how much we
hairspray.
pay for things.
It's
Yeah.
silver and
definitely
shiny. It's
$45.
expensive, right? Yeah.
I do love those TikTok videos of asking men how much women's stuff costs. I'm like, yeah, I don't know what to tell you.
I
It's
have
like,
no
guess how
idea.
much this mascara is.
Or how a tampon works.
Oh yeah, they don't know. They don't know.
It is kind of gray. We're letting you into this secret world that's not really secret.
Yeah. Unfortunately, those men grow up to be congresspeople who set policy, and that is
Yeah,
a problem. Who
don't
don't
know
make
understand.
comments like if you're
Yeah.
raped, the body has ways of taking care of a pregnancy. Like,
Yeah, shutting that whole thing
I
down. Yeah,
yeah,
that's not how it
shutting
works.
I
that whole thing
just
down. It's like, all right, man.
If it's
Take a
legitimate rape,
biology
yeah. Oh my
class.
God. Yeah.
oh my god, those two words do not go hand in hand. Or
Yeah.
and you know how the women in Alabama who were like quote unquote pro life who
Yeah.
are now upset about Roe v. Wade being overturned because
Tommy
it impacts
Tuberville.
IVF.
Yeah. It's like, yeah,
His
what
Yeah.
did you think was
reaction
gonna happen?
Yeah,
was
I'm like, why did you think we were
hilarious.
all so upset?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we don't have autonomy over our own bodies. A
Yeah.
We
gun
tried
has
to
more
tell
rights than we do.
We
Yeah.
tried to tell you this would
This is what you get for
happen.
voting for your husband, for voting the way your husband votes.
Yeah. And for
I have
like
it in my family.
and for like dumbing down the education system, right? This is all part
Mhm.
of the plan
Mhm.
is to have an uneducated populace that's more easy to control.
It makes
And
my
it's
blood
working.
boil
Yeah. Me too.
thinking
Yeah.
about it and how easily people. Anyway, yeah, it's
Yeah.
just
This is not a
special.
politics podcast. This
No,
is
it's
a
I
not.
know.
Buffy
I know.
podcast, but the show is political, so it's relevant.
Yeah, yep.
Um,
It has all that, and yeah, there's so much of it. Like I think that's why, like you know, all this stuff kind of comes all together of why it plays out. It's like the stuff is still relevant.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Dave is watching it, and it's like Dave, I think you're kind of in for a lot of examples of stuff that hasn't gone away.
Yeah.
Like this show still slays for a lot of reasons. One of them being it's still relevant today.
Yeah. And they do such an amazing job. And this is a great example of it this episode of, yeah, there's supernatural forces at work. But if you just pull a few details out of the episode, it is so realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is
Mhm.
bonkers
I-
on how all of
It's
this
scary.
works.
I keep going back to Reptile Boy, which was a season 2
Oh,
episode
gosh.
where Buffy and
Whew.
Cordelia go to a
Yeah.
frat party and
Yep.
almost get sacrificed to a demon. But right up until
Mhm.
the demon part, it is 100%
Uh-huh.
acquaintance rape.
So
They
100%.
get
creepy.
drugged. They get taken
Mhm.
advantage of by older boys at a party, and they get told it's their own fault. And it's funny,
Yeah.
we didn't even cover that episode on the podcast.
No.
And
We
I wrote like
referenced it.
7 pages of notes about it. I was so angry and upset about the whole
Yeah.
relevance and how it happens all the time. And I remember being a teenage girl who went to college parties, even though I shouldn't have.
Same.
And
Same.
and
Same.
the message from adults was like, well, then you deserve whatever you get.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is the only crime. Well, I mean, you guys know being lawyers, it is the only
Mhm.
crime where we almost always look to blame the victim.
Yeah.
And it's not
Yep.
like if your house gets burglarized, it's not like, well, what about your house was asking for it?
Yeah.
The
Like,
only
I mean,
Like,
other
well,
one
yeah,
I
you
can
have
think
nice
of.
landscaping, so
Yeah.
of course they
Yeah.
thought you had stuff worth stealing.
That's the thing. The
Yeah.
only thing that comes close that I've heard of, two things: when people are walking through a quote unquote, which is Bad Neighborhood, which is another thing, having
Yeah.
jewelry on or looking nice. It's like, what did you expect? Or when people get their cars broken into and their doors were open and they had something valuable in it, that is the only other time it ever
Yeah.
comes slightly
That's
close to
true.
people being like, well, you should have locked your doors. Why would you leave your laptop in there? Why would you leave this in there? It's like, can we focus on the fact that somebody stole from me?
Yeah,
Like,
how about we work on people not committing the crime,
yeah.
Yeah.
not
Let's
trying
focus
because
on
like
that.
yeah, like every woman cannot protect herself from every man in the world. That's just not
Yeah.
realistic. And we see this sort of blame
Wild.
being put on for different targets of violence, and it comes from an emotional space. It's not a logical one. It comes from the fear that comes from that randomness that can happen,
Right. So you
and
want to
we
be
don't
able
want
to
that.
say you did
Predict,
something
yeah,
wrong and that's why this
and I
happened to you.
Yeah.
and I won't do it, so it
Well,
won't happen to
we
me. And
talked
it's like
about
that's not
this
how this works.
with Cordelia in The Wish, and how that kind of paralleled and called
Yeah.
upon you were asking for it when they talk about her wearing like come bite me clothes and
I
bright
know.
colors and walking
Really bothered me in
home.
that episode.
Yeah, like it's a pretty clear parallel, and they do that a couple more times in Buffy, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever quite as clear as in The Wish, and it's just like, see how
Yeah.
ridiculous you sound.
Yeah, and it's like and having the two women say those comments really rubbed me the wrong way because
Internalized misogyny.
exactly. I'm like, come on, JW. Like, why are you having the women sell this? It doesn't land better. Like, if anything, it's like, oh, this is even bigger problem.
Yeah.
Like,
It is often women who police other women on behalf of the
exactly.
patriarchy. It happens
Yep.
all
It's not a good
the
thing.
time.
It's like the
Yeah, and
trad
they do it.
wife trend right
Yeah,
now is
it's
a rabbit hole that I
it's
wish
not
I
good.
hadn't gone down.
Yeah, it's not a good thing, and it's the idea of if I side with the oppressor, then I won't be oppressed.
Or
Like
like,
that's not how that
It's like,
works.
all
yeah,
right,
So
I'll
Serena
get
Joy,
a
like,
slightly better
gonna
position.
go well for you.
Handmaid's Tale, I love
Yeah.
it. What were you sorry? What were you saying, Penny?
Oh, that if you like work on behalf of the patriarchy, then you'll get to be second in the
Right.
line
Yeah,
of
yeah,
power, right? Like white men get the top, but white women,
Ridiculous.
you could be right below them. And isn't that better than being anyone else? And there are a lot of white
Mhm.
women who are like, yeah, I'm on
Yeah,
board.
yeah. Because they
it's
think that one way or
ridiculous.
another, they think that, and they forget. Hey, you're still women.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
have more in common with men of color than you do with white men.
it's
Yeah.
true.
So it's just like this illusion of that connection where it's like you're just sort of turning on ourselves because that's exactly what the system wants.
Right.
Because if women join the other oppressed groups,
We could have some
well,
serious power in numbers.
you know, yeah. Like that's why I like the show The Power. Like and
That's
the
such a good
I mean it
show.
was amazing. Of like everything I saw, it was like that's actually really realistic. It would not go over well for women if this was how this developed. I
Oh,
mean, I
yeah.
think it would be
People would be
very
terrified of us. Ha ha
and
ha.
it would have violence. Yeah, and you think about it, it's just a self-defense tactic built in. So and definitely watch The Power on Amazon Prime and definitely listen to the podcast. It was phenomenal. It was like
Yeah.
my debriefing after the episodes because I sometimes had to take a break as much as I loved it because
Yeah.
it really was this painful wish fulfillment for me
So
Yeah.
intense.
of like this hurts that like just everything of like I want this
Mhm.
power so bad. So
Mhm.
like it's yeah, so it was such a great show. I hope it gets renewed.
I'm pretty sure it got picked up for a second season. I think the
Yay.
power of Toni Collette goes a long way in
Yeah.
Hollywood. She's
Yeah.
such a powerhouse of an actor.
Amazing.
I love her so much.
Amazing.
Muriel's Wedding. Woo! Okay.
Yes. So good. And I'm thinking of
Oh,
Hereditary, like two different types
Oh
of
my
people.
yeah.
gosh.
I have not seen that movie. I started it after I saw
Brutal.
Midsummer, and I
It's
loved
so
Midsummer.
good.
I started
Yes.
Hereditary, and then I was like, oh, I think
Different
this is
vibe.
about child abuse. I can't. And I just couldn't watch it.
It's
I
kind of
mean,
similar to I don't want to spoil it
yeah, I don't want to
just in
spoil it
case,
either.
but
Yeah.
it is not
It's
what
not
you think it is.
yeah, it's not about
Is
child
what I will
abuse.
say.
Oh, well, maybe I'll give it
Although
another
How
try.
far did you get into it? Did you get
Not
into
very
the
far.
yeah.
car scene?
No, I didn't get very
Okay.
far in at all. I
All
got
right.
freaked out
Then
really fast.
Yeah, no,
well,
I was thinking about the same thing, Kara.
Yeah.
I was like, well, it's not about child abuse.
but
Oh,
there's some
God.
pretty there's just one scene,
I don't
and
know if it's
I don't
better.
think I have ever gasped louder while watching a movie because it was
Yeah.
completely unexpected. And even though I was sitting there thinking about it, I was like, oh, I'm kind of terrified. I think about this when I do this. And then it happened and I was like,
No.
fuck.
Yeah.
It's similar to Midsummer when that Scream opened up in the very opening of Midsummer. It's that
Yeah.
same sort of bone-chilling moment.
I
Yeah.
love
Where you're like,
A24. It's
Terry
I know.
Astor, man, I would not want to be inside his head.
no,
Or
not at
his
all.
social circle. It's
Yeah,
like,
that too.
it's like, sir, he's just randomly like, how could I kill these people?
Yeah.
I know.
Messed
In
up.
Very,
haunting ways.
very
And
creepy.
yet we eat it up. We love these movies
Oh yeah,
where
I
everything is
do
messed up.
love it. I've been programmed from a young age.
Well, I'm thinking about. I was looking at my notes. I don't think I have anything else that's super spoilery because this episode really, it's kind of a good
Yeah.
standalone monster of the
Yeah.
week that
Yeah.
has some callbacks but doesn't really foreshadow anything super major other than Willow
Yeah.
Yeah.
things.
I
But-
think we've been recording for 3 hours and 8 minutes. I think we can call it.
Yeah,
We
that
have
seems fair.
we have completed our task.
Yes.
I love it. I love it.
All right.
Dude.
That's the end of the episode. The complete end of the show. Everybody, thank you for listening, especially if you made it all the way to the end and
Yeah.
bore with us. We would love to hear your opinions, by the way, not just about the show, but about some of the stuff we talk about. Like, we're open to hearing whatever you
For
guys
sure.
have to say about book banning and groupthink and all this stuff. So,
Yeah.
write in. We love hearing from the listeners. And until next time,
For
I am
sure.
Penny.
And I'm Kara.
And I'm Sam. Keep
Keep
slaying.
slaying.
Did I? Oh no, I don't think I did it right. Sorry. Oh, keep slaying.
Oh, and Angry Giles. Angry Giles. Damn it.
That was amazing. It was like the audio was teasing you the entire time,
Yep.
Kara.
Is it still going?
No, it's done now.
What's the move?
It's not even that important. I was just going to say